Welcome to Poker Fraud Alert Radio. I'm your host, Todd Dan Druff would tell us. This is being broadcast live and recorded live on March 31st, 2025. The time right now is 11:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I know I was supposed to do a part 2 of the show from about 2.5 weeks ago, and then it never happened. But good news, though, even though some of the topics have gotten old, I'm going to include them in this show, at least as long as I can go. And then we will have a long show tonight, is my guess. That might end up in 2 parts, but that'll be 2 parts archived, which will definitely show up, because anything I record on here, I'm definitely going to post, because otherwise I wasted my time. Because I know that most of you listen in podcast format, so there's no way I would waste my breath for talking all these hours and hours and hours for the relatively small audience we have live, when I know most of you are trying to find it in podcast format. So once it gets broadcasted live, it tends to always make it into the archives. And speaking of which, here's where you can find the show in the archives. And I always get the question, Druff, why do you say archives incorrectly? I'm not saying it incorrectly. I'm saying archives. The archives and the archives are 2 different things. And if you don't understand that, then I can't help you. Anyway, this show appears on iTunes, on the TuneIn app, on iHeartMedia, on Spotify. Spotify is very nice. It has clickable timestamps where you can just jump to wherever you want to listen to in the show, because we do a lot of topics. YouTube, which is, I get a little bit of money. When I say a little bit, I mean a little bit, but I do get a little bit of money when you listen over on YouTube. And it's the same program. It's just the Poker Fraud Alert Radio logo for the video portion. But you can use YouTube to listen to the show. And as I said, I get a little bit of money, and I keep the ads to a minimum. I actually place where the ads go. I don't let YouTube do it, or you'll hear them like every 8 minutes, and that's unacceptable. So I make sure it's between topics every once in a while, so it's pretty unnoticeable. And you can skip them if you like. I don't care about that. But if you don't want to listen on YouTube, no problem. Don't feel obligated to do it. But, you know, if you want to, then do it. We're also on Audible. We're on Odyssey. That's Audacy. We are on Amazon Alexa. Just say, Alexa, play Poker Fraud Alert Radio podcast. And we're also on CastBox. And I typically post the archives 16 to 48 hours after the live broadcast concludes. Sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more, but usually in the 16 to 48 hour range. Though sometimes I will split it into 2 parts, where part 1 will come up in that range and part 2 will show up several days later. Depends how long the show is, because it's a big task to edit it. And just to let you know what I do with the editing, I'm not really editing for content. I'm really editing for listenability, so the show flows well. So when I have to pause the show to look something up, that's no longer in there. Or if I say something that is incorrect and I realize it's incorrect and I correct myself, it just flows well so you don't hear the wrong thing and then have to listen to my correction. Stuff like that. I'm not doing that to make it seem like I'm always right. I'm just saying that I do it so the show is more listenable. And it does take a while to do. I remove the pauses where they don't belong. And I just do whatever I can to make the show sound a lot better. And it takes some time. So a 8-hour show is just too oppressive to edit in one sitting. So then I just post part 1 and 2. That's why I do it. Anyway, there is no free roll tonight. I know I said that the free roll would be next time, but we're not going to have it. It's just too late at night and wouldn't get enough participation, so we'll shoot for that next time out. We have a lot of topics to do tonight. Also, I want to let you know that you can't call the show tonight, and I'll explain that shortly when we begin, but you can only text, so don't bother trying to call tonight if you're listening live. You can follow along in the chat room. I prefer you text if you want to get a hold of me, but you can type in the chat room. Just press the chat button near the top of the screen on PokerFraudAlert.com, and you can chat with others who are listening live, or just type things for me to see, and I'll try to answer them. I'll try to glance at it every so often. I see Cat Out of the Bag is in there. That's kind of cool. Oh, he just left. Cat Out of the Bag, I haven't seen him in a while. Long while. Glad he's still around. You can text me, 775-372-8355, before, during, or after the show, and I will typically respond to you. Once in a while, I will read your texts, and then I'm busy and can't respond, or I read them just as I wake up, and then I fall back asleep, and then I forgot that you texted me. So that does happen, but I don't knowingly ignore anybody. And if I don't respond to you, feel free to text me again. It won't be rude. You don't have to feel like you're hassling me. And you're not begging for my attention. Where, like, sometimes I legitimately forget to respond when I mean to, and then I feel bad later when I notice. I've actually had people text me like a year later about a different topic. I'm like, oh crap, I never responded to that guy last year. And I feel bad. And then I try to respond at that point. But that's usually the way it happens. I wouldn't give out the text number to text me anytime if I really was not intending to respond to people. We have a call to listen line. The call to listen line is a number you just call up and listen to the show. It works from any phone in the world, does not require a smartphone, does not require an app, does not require any usage of data, does not require a good connection. No. It's very simple. You just call up and listen from any phone that can dial. 518-931-1189, 518-931-1189. That's the call to listen line. It is not a call-in line. You can't talk to me, but you can listen to me. 518-931-1189 is the call to listen line. You can also call it when we're not on the air, and you'll hear one of our streaming reruns, which, by the way, you can also find on the radio tab of Poker Fraud Alert when we're not on, and the TuneIn app. You'll see has two sections to listen to Poker Fraud Alert Radio, and one of them is the live show, so you can use TuneIn to listen live or our streaming reruns. Here is the agenda, and then we'll get going. See how fast I am? I mean, we have no free roll, so that speeds it up a bit, but I'm trying to make these intros shorter. So I'll have the announcement about the call-in numbers, why they don't work. There's a good reason for it, and I'm working on fixing that. Then we'll do our main topic, and it's a fairly recent topic, and it's a topic that I started, meaning that really nobody's talking about this except me, and in fact, I personally experienced it, and that is the daily fantasy sports site PrizePicks is scamming its users with promotions, with misleading promotions. So I will explain what they're doing, and when I say scamming, it's not that they're not paying people, it's that they are running misleading promotions where you don't get what they're promising you if you don't do some really obscure things that you would not expect to have to do in order to enable the promotion. So people deposit and people play and they think they're getting backed by a promotion, and then it turns out they're really not. That's what's been happening, and it seems to me it's very intentional. I can't say for sure because I'm not in their heads. I haven't seen any proof that it's intentional, but it looks damn intentional to me, and I want the world to be aware of it. And by the way, they have two major competitors, and the two competitors are not doing what they're doing. So that also indicates that something shady is going on. And by the way, I do have a way to combat this. They're going to not like what I'm going to do back. It's going to be legal. Don't worry. I'm not going to do anything illegal to them. It's going to be very legal what I'm doing. But I already have something that I have in the works that's going to be done back. A Chicago man won a $389,000 parlay on BetMGM. Now, I'm no fan of BetMGM, as you know. I was scammed through BetMGM, not by them, but through them, and they didn't handle it well back in 2022, and I'm the one who blew up that whole thing in the media. I even appeared in an ESPN article about this. So I'm not a big fan of BetMGM's, and a lot of people sent this to me saying, look, BetMGM is up to their old tricks, their old antics. They're cheating this poor guy, this veteran, out of $389K because his bet was canceled. And I looked at it, and I said, well, I'm going to look at this from a neutral standpoint, not as someone who has issues with BetMGM, but as a neutral journalist. And I'm going to tell you, honestly, what I think of that story when we get to our second topic. Bovada and Ignition have made a ruling on the whole tournament mess we talked about on the last episode, where a bunch of people got underpaid and Bovada and Ignition were not acknowledging in the chat that there was a problem, even though it was very clear there was a problem. So I'll tell you how that ended up being resolved. Then we're going to do a new segment, kind of a new old segment called Druff Comments. Now, it's never been called Druff Comments before, but I have done things like this. This is honestly my favorite thing to do on radio, where I play some kind of video and then I comment on it. Not only is it easier on my voice because I don't have to talk the entire way, but it's also something that I enjoy doing. I just really love playing videos and commenting on it. If you ask me what the most fun part of the show is for me, it's when I comment on videos I'm playing. So anyway, we're going to play the John Oliver video where he spends a good deal of time criticizing the expansion of sports betting. So I'm going to play it. I'm going to stop it as I feel like, and I'm going to comment on it. So this is a new feature called Druff Comments. I may not play the whole thing, but I'll play as much as I feel like playing and comment on what John Oliver has to say. And I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler. I don't agree very much with him at all. Resorts World is going to be laying off as many as 400 employees, depending upon who you believe. And also they paid a huge fine, the biggest fine in Nevada history, for a gaming violation. I will tell you about both things that are going on with Resorts World. Then we're going to do a Mojave Desert and Las Vegas history segment, but I'm going to be honest, it's kind of a loose Mojave Desert and Las Vegas history segment because it's kind of a combination of recent history and the present. It's not quite exactly what you usually hear for Mojave Desert and Las Vegas history, where I pick some obscure thing from the desert or something that goes way back in Vegas and give you the history. But this does have some historical elements, so I think it qualifies. And I'm the only one who can make the judge of whether I can call it Mojave Desert and Las Vegas history. So I'm going to call it that. I'm going to play a little intro, and then we're going to do it. It's about the Barbary Coast, which became Bill's Gambling Hall, which became the Cromwell, and soon the Vanderpump Hotel. Yes, the Vanderpump Hotel is going to be coming next year to Vegas, so that's going to be part of Mojave Desert and Las Vegas history, and I guess also Las Vegas future. Then we have an old topic that we just never got to, but I want to talk about it, and that's Ebony Kenny. She is the latest goofball ACR pro to have been caught using GTO Wizard during the ACR Venom series, which is a tournament series they have on there. I know this is an old story, but some of you don't know about it, and some of you still want to hear what I have to say about it if you know about it. So we're going to talk about Ebony Kenny and what she was caught doing. This is something that not only was caught back in February, I believe, but also something that occurred in 2024, but didn't come to light till 2025. Another older story, Maurice Hawkins got a boost by eliminating a player with 3 left in the World Series of Poker circuit event that he was playing, despite having the worst hand. Basically, the third-place guy got eliminated by Maurice despite winning the hand. And that's the first time that's ever happened to anyone's knowledge that deep in a tournament. This is a pretty big tournament. This is a World Series of Poker ring event, which Maurice ended up winning and getting a ring. And the top prize was 6 figures. So I will talk about that. I'll give you my opinion on the whole thing. And I'll tell you about some debate in the poker community, not over whether Maurice should have won the hand. Obviously, it's right on video. It's clear he shouldn't have. But who's at fault, who to blame, what should be done, etc., etc. Remember the story we did about George Jansen, that weird guy who claimed he was kidnapped and extorted for money, and then he was found zip-tied on the side of the road? And I had some serious doubts about the story, especially because there's a plume of $50 bills that was in his car when he vanished, almost like a plume of 50s just flew up in the air when they grabbed him out of the car. I'll tell you guys, if you ever kidnap me, there will not be a plume of $50 bills flying up in the air. I don't think there'll be any bills flying up in the air if you kidnap me. I think you'll be able to kidnap me without a single bill hitting the ground. But somehow with him, there's a plume of $50 bills that flew up in the air and landed in his car. I was very skeptical of the whole story. So is the FBI, apparently. He is under investigation by the FBI and also has been arrested by the FBI. So I will give you the update on that. Ali Imstrovic banned from the Texas Champions Club just for being a poker cheat. Just because they're like, we don't want a cheater here. He hadn't cheated there, to their knowledge, but they're like, no, we don't want him here. He had already registered, and they unregistered him, gave him his money back, and kicked him from the property and said he can't come back. I'll give you my thoughts on that. Here's a story that I wish I had broken months ago, because I knew I got insider information, but I did not reveal it. I don't know why I didn't reveal it. I should have. People would have said, oh, wow, Druff knew this months in advance. But yeah, Nick Vertucci's share of Hustler Casino Live has been sold to GG Poker. So GG Poker now owns what Nick Vertucci did, presumably half of Hustler Casino Live, the other half being owned by Ryan Feldman. I knew about this months ago. Not that it was 100%, but I knew that GG Poker was the most likely buyer and had very serious talks going on with Hustler. Because people tell me things. And I was told this, by a reliable source. And I could have reported it. I could have even reported it as a rumor. but I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. I didn't post it anywhere. You just had to trust me, I knew, okay? I didn't do you any good because I didn't tell you, but just trust me, I knew. So we'll talk about that. Mike Holtz alleged that Resorts World allowed 2 Spanish pros to get away with blatantly cheating. So we will talk about that. I'll give you my opinion on how Resorts World handled that whole thing, whether I believe Mike Holtz, who has appeared on the show, by the way. Remember Terrence Watanabe, who was one of the biggest casino whales of all time back in the 2000s? Well, he has some competition now, much more famous competition. Bruno Mars might have lost over $100 million to MGM properties during his residency there. And he still has an association with MGM, so it's not like it's over. But he may have already lost $100 million at MGM properties. I'm talking about gambling, of course. So we will discuss Bruno Mars, and I'll remind you about Terrence Watanabe as well. Speaking of MGM, MGM Rewards is a little bit better than it was earlier this year. They did a weird thing and actually modified their program to give more benefits starting on March 25th, 2025, which is a really weird time to do it because usually they release all the new benefits when the new MGM year starts, which is February 1st, just like it is for Caesars. So you think it began on February 1st. No, it actually begins on March 25th, which means it began 6 days ago because it is right now March 31st. So I will tell you about these new benefits. They've only added, they haven't taken away, so these are things they added to the program. Some of these are nice things to have, and you should be aware of them. And I'll tell you the fine print of whether you will be able to access these benefits or not. They're not just based on tier, they're based on another factor as well. But they have modified the program, and I'll give you some guesses as to why. Finally, Whiskey Pete's, which is closed in Prim, Nevada, which is right on the border between California and Nevada when you're driving towards Vegas from California, from Southern California, that is. They're closed, but they got a waiver to remain closed and retain their license, which is important because it's a lot harder to apply for a new license than to just reopen under your existing license. So they want to retain the right to reopen under this license, and they were granted that through the end of 2026. I'll tell you why they are interested in that, why that matters, and what might be coming to that area that could change their fortunes. Something pretty big. That is our show for the evening. By the way, I just want to let you guys know, I had a friend that most of you did not know. His name was Trevor Garner, and he just had nothing to do with poker or gambling. That's why I never mentioned him out here, and he never appeared on Poker Fraud Alert Radio. But he actually had his own podcast, which I occasionally appeared on, and I've been friends with him for the last 15 years. And he passed away recently of pancreatic cancer at the age of 59. And the reason I'm bringing this up out here is that I did an interview with him about a pretty interesting topic, not about poker or gambling, but I think you guys will be interested in what we're going to talk about on that interview. I did a final interview with him 3 days before he passed away, and I didn't know at the time he was 3 days away from passing. He seemed healthier than that. I knew he was terminal. I knew he was not likely to make it out of the first half of 2025. He had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, but I didn't know 3 days later he was going to be gone. I even told him, hey, I'll come back and see you another time. He was in the hospital about 80 miles from me, so it wasn't trivial to visit him, but of course I made sure to get down there and see him, and I'm glad I did. But the reason I'm telling you guys that is the interview, I didn't have any of my equipment down there, so I just did it on my phone, so it was kind of hard to put together. So I'm still editing that interview. I meant to have it part of this show, but I may or may not have it ready for the archives. It definitely won't be played live because I haven't finished editing it. But when I am done editing it, it will be part of one of these shows. It'll probably be an archives-only thing, so it'll appear either in the part 1 or part 2 if this is the 2-part episode. And if for whatever reason I don't edit it by the time I get this entire episode up, then it'll be in the next episode. But you guys will find this interesting. It has to do with his battles with a pretty well-known radio personality in California, where he was just really legally attacked by the guy for no good reason. But it had a nice ending, and it was very sad to hear from Trevor about his situation and then his passing, which even came a little earlier than I expected. I mean, as I said, I knew he was not going to live much longer, so it wasn't shocking. But, it was very sad the guy didn't even make 60 years old. And I really liked him, and he was a very interesting and unique guy. And so I was very sad for me to have another one of my friends pass away like this. You guys know Dave Lerman, we had on this show before, was part of that same friend group. And Dave Lerman passed away as well in the last few years. And I know I mentioned that before in that show when I discovered that. But Trevor's never appeared on this show, but he was part of that same group. I actually have a picture of the three of us together, and now I'm the only one left. So it's quite sad, as you get older, to lose friends that are around your age. So anyway, rest in peace, Trevor Garner, and you'll probably hear the interview in the archives of part 1 or 2 of this show. And again, if not, you'll hear it in the next show. So moving to our first topic, I want to tell you about the Poker Fraud Alert phone number. As you probably know, the phone number for Poker Fraud Alert Radio is 775-FRAUD-55, which breaks out to 775-372-8355. If you try to call it right now, despite the fact that I am on the air, you will not reach me. You will get a first-ring voicemail. And that is because I cannot be reached right now. And this all has to do with Skype shutting down and the preparations that I am making to switch to another service in order to have my radio show be reachable by phone and also to connect the co-hosts on. Because that's what Skype was doing for me. It was doing two things. It was allowing you to call into the show and having everybody be able to hear you. And then the second thing was allowing co-hosts to come on and sound like they're basically in the same room as me, except for Trey Ruski, who always has bad sound quality. But we love him anyway. But you guys know he doesn't always sound the best, voice quality-wise, because he calls from a cell phone or whatever. But like people like Cal Watt. Cal Watt sounds like he's sitting right next to me, even though he's in New York, and any other co-host I have, as long as they're at a computer with a headset, they sound like they're right here. So I really liked Skype for that. And then, of course, it could also take the phone calls. And, even if Trey Ruski threw on a headset, then he would sound like he's right next to me. Maybe one day he will get a headset. Maybe one day. A man can dream. Anyway, you can't even call me anymore, except one way. You can call me on Skype for the next month or so before that goes away too. Because Skype still works, but the phone part of Skype has been disconnected. So if you try to call the main Poker Fraud Alert number, you will get first ring voicemail. You'll hear my voice, but you will not get me. The Mount Charleston line, will that work? No. The Mount Charleston line will really not get you anywhere. That's been not turned off, but it has been put aside for the moment as I'm fixing all this. But don't worry, it's not going away. I'm not going to ever let the Mount Charleston go away. And in fact, in this whole thing, I actually got a second Mount Charleston number. Because I was just fiddling with this whole thing, trying to fix it. And I'm like, you know what? I just want a second Mount Charleston number, so I went and got one. I really have a second Mount Charleston number, which I may or may not give out. At the moment, I'm not giving it out. But the main Mount Charleston line that you all know, that will stay, and that will be part of the next show. But at the moment, it is put aside. So the way to reach me during this show is to text me. 775-372-8355. You can text me during the show, after the show, before the show, whatever. That still works. You just cannot call. If you really want to talk to me and you have Skype, you don't need a paid account. Just, if you have Skype, you can text me your Skype name and I can put you on. Or I can text you my Skype name to call me there. But yeah, it's going to be kind of tough to call me until I get this all rectified, which I'm hoping will be soon. So that's the story for the moment. Now, we've been on so late, we haven't gotten many calls recently because most people are sleeping and catch the show later. So it's not a huge loss for the moment. But yeah, you can't call me right now, and it is because of Skype going down and the transition that I'm in the process of making. I started the transition earlier than I had to, so I could have started it in May, but I chose to do it now, and at the moment, there's no way to call me. So just letting you know that'll be that case until I say otherwise. Hopefully within the next month or so, I will have this resolved and you can call the show again. Let's get to our first main topic here. And that is about PrizePicks as we move into April. It is April right now, April 1st at midnight, exactly midnight right now. Good time to talk about a site that basically plays an April Fool's joke 365 days a year on its players, and that is PrizePicks. You may or may not have heard of PrizePicks, exactly as it sounds, PrizePicks. And it's a daily fantasy sports site. So what you do on PrizePicks is you go on there and you can make various picks regarding what players of various sports will do on that day, such as how many strikeouts they'll get in baseball, how many points they'll get in basketball, how many rebounds they'll get in basketball, things like that. A whole lot of different categories, a whole lot of different sports. Basketball, baseball, football, hockey, soccer, even tennis and cricket, things like that. So that's PrizePicks. There are a number of other sites like this. The main two competitors, the other two large sites like this, are DraftKings, which of course you know about, and Underdog, which you may not know about. They're all fairly similar. They all have their differences too. I'm not going to get into exactly what's different about PrizePicks and DraftKings. DraftKings has more to it than PrizePicks does. They also have a sports book, as you know. So DraftKings is a bigger operation. That's the biggest operation of them all. But I'm talking about the parlays of props. And when I say props, as I said, I'm talking about individual players that you're betting on what stats they get. And you're basically going one of two directions, either more or less. So, for example, Luka Doncic will get either more or less than 29.5 points. So if he ends up with 30 or more points in that game, then the more side would win. If he gets 29 or fewer, then the less side will win. So you make these picks, and you put them together, and all of them have to win. So let's say you make 4 picks on one ticket, and one of the 4 does not win, but 3 of them do. Well, then you're going to lose the whole ticket. It's going to be worth 0. So you got to win every pick that you make on one ticket. And, of course, the more picks on one ticket, the bigger multiple of your original bet you will get paid out. That's the basic concept behind what you're doing here. So for those of you that know sports betting, this is basically parlaying prop bets. That's really what you're doing here. Now, as far as the payouts, they're not very good on these sites. And by the way, this is actually legal at the moment in most states, including California. So even though I don't have any sports books in California, I cannot bet directly on games. I can't just say, well, I think the Lakers minus 5.5 today, I'm going to take the Lakers. I can't do that today on a legal sports book in California because there is no such thing. I have to do it on sports books like Bet Online, which are not legal. They're legal for me to play, but they're not legal to offer the bets to me, even though they do anyway. So those are not legal or regulated or U.S.-based. But I'm talking about PrizePicks, Underdog, and DraftKings. These are U.S.-based. They are legal, at least for the moment. And you're basically only able to do these parlays of these prop picks on individual players. That's all you can do. It's sometimes referred to as pick 6, even though you don't have to pick 6 different legs to each ticket, but that's what it's called in some places, like on DraftKings. So that's what this is. And someone got me into this back in like November, and I've enjoyed it. I got off to a really good start on Underdog, and then since then I've kind of slumped. So I think I'm about even overall, if you add it all together. Started off way up, and then I chunked it off, but I got lucky at the beginning. I'm still kind of feeling my way through. Something I did notice is that the normal odds on these sites are very poor. So if you don't ever use a promo, then you're going to get your ass kicked because they're just not paying out what they should pay out. You're not getting paid enough when you win is the problem. So really, in order to have a chance to win long term, you need to only or mostly bet when there's promos. And the type of promo there would be something like you're getting 60% extra payout, which is called like a 60% boost when you win, which sounds huge, but that shows you how bad the odds are that they can actually offer things like that because it takes fairly decent-sized boosts in order to become positive expectation. So there's that type of promo, and then there's also what's known as a protected play. A protected play is where you have to bet real money on the play in the first place, but if you lose, they give it back to you in free play. It's not a free roll because they're not giving you your money back fully. They're actually giving you free play, which then you have to cycle through once on their site and play again. And if you lose that, then it's gone. But it's almost as good as a free roll. At least you're getting whatever you lose back and you get a second shot. So that's what we're going to talk about with PrizePicks. PrizePicks does not really do boosts. They have the worst promos in the industry. DraftKings does boosts. Underdog used to do boosts like a whole lot, like several times a week, and then somehow they just stopped recently. I'm not sure why. Maybe they were getting beat. Because Underdog's a bit different than the others. I guess Underdog and PrizePicks are different than the others. Those two you're going directly against the house, whereas on DraftKings it's pari-mutuel where you're going against the other players. And I'm not sure if I'll bother getting into that because that's not really part of this story. PrizePicks promos tend to only be small protected plays, where basically you can bet like $20 or $25, and then if you lose, they give it back to you in free play. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So I'm not going to be talking about a big money scam. I'm not going to say, hey, PrizePicks ripped me out of $10,000, because they didn't. My assertion is that PrizePicks is ripping people off $20 at a time, especially people who take advantage of the promotions for the first time. Especially that. How much this adds up to, I don't know. It's a pretty big company. So this is not a small operation. Remember, these are 3 big sites: PrizePicks, DraftKings, and Underdog. My problem is with PrizePicks. I've got no issue with DraftKings, no issue with Underdog. My issue is with PrizePicks and how they are conducting these promotions. And I find it to be not only unethical, I believe it is illegal. And I'm going to be looking into this, so to speak. And all I can say is PrizePicks better watch out, because I've already got someone interested. Let's just say that. And again, what I'm saying here is anything I'm going to do to PrizePicks is going to be completely legal. So anyway, I'll tell you about the protected plays on PrizePicks and why I feel that these are scammy. So basically, you get an email from PrizePicks letting you know that a protected play is being offered. So you'll get an email saying something like, we have a $20 Major League Baseball protected play for you. And so it says, I'm actually reading from an email I got on March 27th. Hey, PrizePicks member, America's pastime is officially back. Lock in your Major League Baseball lineup today with a $20 protected play. Opt-in required. More details below. Now let's stop right here. Opt-in required. What does that mean? Well, it means you have to click a button to opt in. You can't just go bet $20 and get the $20 back in free play. You have to opt in. Okay, fine. That is very standard. Underdog makes you do that. DraftKings makes you do that. That is not my problem. And it says right there, opt-in required. So if you don't opt in, that's your fault. So that's not my issue here at all. Now it says more details below, and then there's very small print, which I actually had to blow up because I'm old. It says opt-in required, balance funds only. That means we're only giving you this promo if you're actually betting real money. If it's free play you've earned before, you're not going to earn free play on the free play. Which, okay, fine, that's reasonable. Lineup must only contain Major League Baseball. That's fine, too. This promo is for Major League Baseball. They're saying you're not going to get this promo if you bet on NBA or any other sport. Fine, that's their terms. They can make the terms whatever they want, completely ethical. Must use by 10:10 p.m. Eastern Time on March 27th. Totally fine. Net losses will be paid back in promo funds, up to $20 when lineup settles. So basically what they're saying here is that if you win, you don't get anything extra. If you lose, you're going to get up to $20 back in free play. So if your bet is $100, you're only going to get $20 on free play. If your bet's $20, you'll get $20 on free play. If your bet's $15, you'll get $15 on free play. Basically, they'll match what you bet if you lose with free play up to $20. Totally fine. And then it says, if the lineup is refunded due to reboots, DMPs, meaning did not plays, or ties, it does not qualify for additional refunds. So basically, they're saying all 3 of these have to resolve. If you pick a player that ends up not playing, and it is considered a tie for that reason, we're not honoring the promo. Well, that's, again, this is all fine. This is all pretty standard, okay? Final thing, it says, protected plays cannot be combined with any other discounts or promotions. Okay, fine too. So you may say, Druff, what's your problem? You're fine with everything, right? Yes, the way it's written, it's fine. I don't have an issue with the way it's written. If they did what they wrote there, then I would not be doing this segment. So you go over to PrizePicks. Let's say we want to take advantage of this. We go over to PrizePicks. We click on the Promotions tab, which is near the top of the screen, and you see a page that shows the promotions, and this particular one would have been shown on that day. And there's two buttons under it. One says Learn More, and one says Opt In. Now, Opt In is very obvious, very large. It says Opt In with a blue background that stands out. And then the Learn More button is just as big, but it's in black along with the background. So it's not quite as prominent, but you can see it pretty clearly too. So, of course, you click Opt In, which I did, and that's fine. Again, I have no issue with the opting in part. And then you would think I'd want to click Learn More so I can understand the terms. So any terms and conditions, I always like knowing the rules on these things. You learn any terms and conditions. So I did click on Learn More. Really, basically what it said was the fine print in the email. So it didn't tell me anything more that I needed to know. It said Learn More, but I really just read something similar to the fine print in the email. So that should be it, right? I opted in. After I opted in, the opt-in button turns into a message that either says play now or build lineup, which is basically the same thing, which is obviously implying you have the promo. So you've opted in, it says, okay, play now, again, or build lineup. So it's saying, okay, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and set your lineup. That's what it's saying, right? Very obvious. However, would you believe that at that moment, you actually don't have the promo? How could that be? I opted in. I followed the instructions on the email. I mean, I hadn't set my lineup yet, but provided I pick only Major League Baseball players, I should get $20 back if I bet $20 of real money and lose. Wouldn't you say that from what I read you? And there's a big blue opt-in button, which I clicked, and then it says play now or build lineup. Wouldn't you say that that means that I'm opted in? Shouldn't that mean I've got it? By the way, a little box pops up when you click it, and it says, you've successfully opted into this promo. Well, that should especially say that I have it, right? But I don't have it. Now, how is that possible? Well, there is a second opt-in you have to do that they don't tell you about. And if you don't do that second hidden secret opt-in, then guess what? You don't get your $20 free play. Isn't that sneaky? This second opt-in is not mentioned in the fine print in the email, and you can see that on the Scam, Scandals, and Shadiness forum where I posted this topic. I posted an exact screenshot of that portion of the email. And if you click the Learn More button, it does not say that you have to do this second opt-in, but you do. See, when you're building your lineup, there's a small box that's much smaller than every other box in the build lineup area. So where you're picking the players, it's much bigger, and other information having to do with that is much bigger. The small box in smaller print has a little checkbox that you have to click. So there'd be a little checkbox that's hard to see that says $20 protected play. And you have to check that box. And if you don't check that box that they don't warn you about in advance, then you're not considered opted in. And if you lose, you don't get your $20 free play. Now, if you check the box, you'll get it. But how do you know to check the box? You don't know. So just about everybody I know that's played on PrizePicks doesn't check that box the first time. And when they think they're getting their $20 back for losing, they don't get it. That, my friends, is a scam. May not be intentional, though I think it is. But it may not be intentional, but whatever it is, that is a scam. When they're enticing you to deposit and play with a protected play where they'll give you your money back in free play up to $20 if you opt in, and then you opt in and you don't get it. That is a scam. I'm sorry. Now you may say, okay, well, I'm sure support would be understanding. I'm sure if you email support or chat with support, which you can do 24 hours a day, and say, hey, I'm a new player here. I didn't know about this. This is the first time I've ever done this, and nothing that I've looked at says I have to do it. The Learn More button doesn't say that. The fine print doesn't say that in the email. So I didn't know to do that, and it's very small, so I didn't know to click it. I thought I was opted in. I thought I'm going to get $20 back. You'd think support would say, okay, as a one-time exception, we're going to give you your $20 free play, because it's only $20. It's not like they're giving you $1,000. Here's your $20, but if this happens again, now you know, now it's your fault. Now, by the way, that's still kind of shitty, because it's easy to still miss. It's still easy to forget. It's non-standard. It's weird. It's just another place to screw up and not get what they're promising you. But fine, at least if you know it, at least if you know in advance, it's not a scam. But for first-time people on the promotion, new players who are doing this promotion for the first time, that had no way to see this, had no way to know this, if they don't click that box and then they go to support, support says no. They will not do it. They will not listen to reason. They will not care. They don't care what you show them. They don't care what screenshots you send. They will just keep saying over and over and over again, you're wrong, your fault, you should have looked, you didn't click, sorry, the box was right there, you didn't check it, tough luck. Over and over and over again, they will not budge. I'm not sure if their chat support is AI or if these are just foreign-based reps, but whatever it is, they've been instructed to deny. They will not give you that no matter what you say to them. So basically, you deposit, you play, you do everything it says you need to do, and then you do not end up getting what they promise you. Sorry, that's a scam. I had a chat with a PrizePick rep named Dana, where Dana even admitted that I opted in. I wrote, and this is in the middle of the chat I'm going to read you. I posted this screenshot. Again, tell me how I violated the terms of the email. It said opt-in required, and you admitted I opted in. And Dana wrote, we completely empathize with your viewpoint and worry. However, it's important to note that the app operates according to established regulations, policies, and guidelines that apply to everyone. Even our team in member support diligently adheres to these guidelines. So basically they're saying, what we're doing is legal, F you. That's basically what that message said. So I said, again, it's illegal to put opt-in required in the email and not give it to me when I click on a button saying opt-in. Really, it says opt-in required, I opt in, I don't get it. So she admitted, you opted in on March 27th, 14:02, meaning 2:02 p.m. The problem here is you did not click the checkbox to apply the promo. So I said, exactly, the checkbox did not appear. And what I meant was that the checkbox did not appear as something I had to do. There's no documentation telling me I had to click the checkbox. There was nothing that was prominently telling me, or really telling me at all, that this is something I have to do in order to get the promo. I followed all the instructions and I didn't get it. I said I opted in exactly as the email said, I wrote, and I did not get my promo. The email did not state a checkbox in the terms. Do you need me to send the screenshot again? Well, she ignored that and just continued telling me, sorry, I can't give it to you. Sorry, I can't give it to you. They even have a video they send you, because she sent this to me in our chat. I'm going to play you the video. They actually have a video they send you after the fact, after you've already been screwed by this, explaining what you did wrong. So basically, they're showing you for next time, so you don't get screwed, this is how you do it, which is not very helpful after you've already been screwed out of $20 of free play.
Want to activate your awesome promos in the PrizePicks app?
Yeah, so awesome. So awesome that they find a way not to give it to you.
Here's how to get started. First, click the Promotions tab. Opt into the promo you want to use.
It actually says play now, and it says you've successfully opted into the promo. It already looks bad on their own video.
Then tap play now. Pick your players and place your entry. Once your entry is built, locate the promotions that can be applied to your...
So see, there it is. Like, it's a tiny thing. They're showing on their own video. This is someone picking, like, football back during football seasons. They're picking Pat Mahomes and they're picking Josh Allen for certain stats. And then it says under there, power play must hit 2 out of 2 in the lineup, 2 times correct in big print. And then small print, tiny print in the middle, it says $25 protected play with a checkbox. Tiny print in the middle. Like, even their own video is showing how not prominent this is.
Your entry. Tap the box to apply the promotion to your entry. Check open entries to identify that your promotion has been applied.
So that's the other thing they hide behind. They say, if the promotion got applied, then you're going to see it. Then you're going to see it when you go look at the lineup you submitted. But that's not always true. Like on DraftKings, it doesn't do that. So it's not like you can expect that you're going to see the promo's been applied. Like, for example, today on DraftKings, I'll tell you, I did 2 lineups, both on promos, and one won and one lost. And it did not say anywhere that I had the promo. Now, if I went to the promotions area, it shows opted in, but it did not say on my lineup that I had any promo. But I did, and DraftKings gave me the promo, and everything was fine, and they paid me as expected. Underdog, they actually show you have the promo on there, but DraftKings doesn't, so this is not standard. So just because you don't see it says you have the promo when you've placed your lineup doesn't mean that you don't have it. That this isn't something which should be obvious, because they said, well, you can always cancel. You have 5 minutes to cancel it and resubmit. I have no way to know that, and I had no way to know that this was a problem in the first place. I thought I was in line to get $20 if I lost. Now, again, this is not big money. I know some of you are probably thinking, come on, Druff, you're making a big segment about it being cheated out of $20 of free play? Yes, because this has happened to a ton of people on there, because it's going to happen to you because you have no way to know that this is going to happen. You don't see it coming until after it has occurred, and then they won't fix it. If they at least would give it back to you if you complain to support, and then they say, okay, this is a one-time thing, we won't do it again for you, that still has issues. It's still what I call a negative checkoff scam, where they're only making it right for those who complain, and it's also inducing the problem to happen again if you happen to miss it when you're doing it in the future, because it's non-standard. So it's still a problem, but it's not nearly as bad. If they at least were to give people a one-time $20 credit when that happens, then I probably wouldn't be doing this segment. But they won't do it. They dig their heels in. They won't do anything for you and hide behind, it's legal, tough luck, we empathize with you. Yeah, sure you do. Goodbye. I even had them disconnect in the middle of a chat saying, we've already told you we're not discussing this further. Goodbye. That's not the exact words they use, but that's what they did to me. I had some people on Twitter say to me, wait a minute. First of all, you learn it. You learn it after the first time, and then you do it right from that point forward. So who cares? You lose $20 the first time. There's so many bigger problems with the daily fantasy sports industry. Why are you focusing on this, on a one-time thing where you don't get your $20 before you realize how it works over there? And I said, because it's wrong. Because when you are having a promo that's enticing people to deposit and to play, where they're going to get their $20 back in free play, and then they don't get it, that is an issue when I believe they're doing it on purpose. And why do I believe they're doing it on purpose? Well, I will tell you. Number one, Underdog and DraftKings don't operate this way. When you opt in on Underdog, you have it. That's it. You automatically have it as long as you stick to the terms of what you need to bet, however many legs of the ticket or whatever sport it is, whatever those terms are, which they clearly state, then you have it. There's nothing further to do. Same with DraftKings. In fact, I just did DraftKings today. You clicked opt in, and again, if you stick to the terms, then you get it automatically. That's the way it should work. That's the way it does work on their main two competitors. That's what everybody expects when they go to PrizePicks. They expect it to work the same way. Who would ever think there's a second place to opt in? But the fact that this is not listed in the fine print, the fact that this isn't listed in the big print, why wouldn't they say something that's non-standard? Why wouldn't they warn you in big print if this isn't a trick of some sort? Why wouldn't it be listed in the Learn More button? Why wouldn't it say when you click opt-in, why wouldn't a pop-up come up and say, okay, make sure to click the checkbox to enable it on the lineup you want? They don't show that. They could show that. They choose not to show that. They choose not to reveal anything about the need to click the checkbox until after you get screwed by it. And then you talk to them and say, where's my $20? And then they tell you. That's how you learn. So obviously they're hiding it because there's many places they could put this and they choose not to. And they know it's something that's misleading. They even warn you on their own video to make sure to remember to do this. And support gets tons of these complaints. In fact, when I brought this up on Twitter, I got a lot of people responding to me saying, yeah, that happened to me too. And in fact, I had some people saying, yeah, it happens to me multiple times. Even though I know about it, it still happens because it's so non-standard. It's so easy to forget to do. But for the first-time players, it's especially bad because they have no clue that they have to do this. And they purposely don't mention it anywhere to where people will know to do it. Why not, when you click opt-in, why not pop up something and say, okay, make sure to click the box or you're not going to get the promo? Why not pop that up? Why not at least put that in the Learn More button when you click on that? Why not put it in the terms of the email very clearly? So this violates Druff's law of ethical business behavior. Druff's law of ethical business behavior states that if the average customer is not going to be aware of something, then the business has failed in letting the customer know whatever the situation is. So anything non-standard that most customers are not going to know when they transact with the business, then that is the business's fault for not informing the customer. And that applies across all industries, not just daily fantasy sports, not just sports books, not just casinos, not just poker, but I mean all industries, gambling or non-gambling. Anything that is non-standard needs to be disclosed to the customer before the transaction occurs. You can't surprise the customer later and cost them money because they didn't know about something that's non-standard. Anything non-standard that the customer normally wouldn't know has to be clearly disclosed to be ethical. Not buried in the fine print, but clearly disclosed. And if it's not disclosed at all, that's a huge problem. That's a gigantic problem. Then it's usually a scam when it's not disclosed at all. So there are really a lot of ways that one could attempt to opt into this promo, do everything they say, and just never understand that the checkbox is required in order to get the promo that they are telling you how to get. And then if you follow their instructions to the letter, you still don't get it. That is a big problem. When they won't make it right when you complain about it, that's a scam. I'm sorry. I had some people say, wait a minute, it's a good thing they have that checkbox because this way you don't have to apply it to every lineup. This way you can choose the lineup. If you're going to set 4 lineups today, you can choose which one you want to apply it to. My answer to that is bullshit. I'll tell you why it's bullshit. First of all, it doesn't really matter which play is protected. It doesn't matter if you're going to get your $20 back for the first one, for the second one, for the third one, for the fourth one. Who cares? If you're putting up 4 different tickets, who cares which of the 4 is going to give you the $20 back if it loses? It's pretty much all equivalent, right? So I don't see why anyone even would care about where it's applied to. Second, the other sites don't work this way. The other sites apply to whatever first one you do that meets that criteria. So, for example, today on DraftKings, they had a 70% boost to any NBA ticket up to $25. So if you put a $25 NBA ticket, they're going to give you a 70% boost on whatever you win if you win. So you click opt-in, and if you place an NBA ticket, then that one is the one it covers. If you place a second NBA ticket, then it will not be covered. You don't get to choose. But that's fine. That's the way the industry works. That's intuitive. That makes sense. So them hiding behind, oh, you get to choose where to apply the promo, that's bullshit. But you know what? If it's so important to let people choose, I have a solution. Check the box automatically by default. Have the box show up checked, which they can do, and then you can uncheck it if you want, so you can apply it to a different lineup, if that's really what they want to give you as an option. But to not have the box checked already, and to have it in very small print, much smaller print than the rest of the ticket, so you miss it, and to not mention the box anywhere, even in their own terms, and then you have to just know somehow, by being psychic, you have to click it to get the promo, that, my friends, is intentional, and it is a scam. I don't think it's a very smart scam, because what they do is they get people angry, and those people may not want to keep playing there. Those people may say, screw PrizePicks, I'm going to go to DraftKings. I'm not going to play on PrizePicks anymore. But I think they assume that these are addicted gamblers, and they're going to keep playing anyway. Especially when your support can make people feel like it's their fault. Because what I have noticed is that if you tell people that you didn't get something because you made some mistake, and then they can point to the mistake you made, you end up feeling stupid. Most people don't stop and think, wait a minute, this is their fault for not being clear. This is not my fault for not being psychic about having to click that box, or not having to scour every inch of the ticket and make sure there's not a tiny box to click. I mean, that is their fault. But most people go, oh, the box. Oh, I'm so stupid. Why didn't I click the box? Man, why didn't I read the whole thing? Why didn't I look at every bit of the ticket and see there's a box to click? Man, I'm a fucking moron. Oh, well, My fault, only $20, no big deal, I'll do it next time. That's what most people end up thinking. They blame themselves. And that's what they're counting on at PrizePicks, is that you're going to blame yourself. You're going to blame yourself for not following directions properly, for not reading everything. So I guess they figure they save a lot of money this way. In fact, they encourage you to deposit again, because think about it. You deposit, you play, you lose, you don't get the free play you're expecting, your account's back to zero. Well, the only way now to get the next promo like this is to deposit again and do it right. So this way, they're guaranteeing like 2 deposits from you if you ever want to get one of these promos. Very shady. Very, very shady. And the fact that the chat is so difficult and combative and so condescending and so arrogant, they will not give you a penny. They won't give you anything. Tough luck. Your fault. You didn't read. They don't say those words, but that's basically what they're saying. They will never back down. They will never give you any kind of credit here. How hard is it for them to say, okay, we understand how you missed it. Here's $20 free play. One time we'll do it for you. That's it. We're never doing this again. They won't even do that. Which, again, is not perfect. That still has issues because people can still make the same mistake, and there's those who will not even complain, not even notice. Or if they do notice, they just won't complain and figure they did something wrong. So the fact that you'd have to complain to get your $20 you should be rightfully getting because you followed all the instructions is still a problem. That's a negative checkoff scam. But here, this is worse than a negative checkoff scam. This is just an outright scam where you follow the instructions and they will not give you the money that they're supposed to give you in free play. Yes, it's only $20, but multiply that through all the customers this has happened to, and it's probably a lot of money, probably at least hundreds of thousands of dollars. You have to look at intent here. I had people debating me on Twitter, go, this is not a scam. This is not intentional. You just have to know the rules. You have to know the industry. I do know the industry. This is not standard. And I ask these people, okay, if this is not intentional, why do they not put it when you click opt-in? Why do they not make it clear? If they've got an issue with people not understanding this, which they know they do because they have support already with the answer, they have a video already to explain this. If they know this is an issue, people keep making this mistake, why are they not making it clear when you click the opt-in button? Why not put a pop-up explaining to go click the checkbox? Why not put it in the Learn More section? Why not put it in the email fine print? Because they want you to miss it. That's why. That is my guess. And I think it's a pretty correct guess. But what can be done here? What can be done? Well, if they were a site that was based outside the U.S., then there would be nothing I could do other than shame them on social media, which I've already done. But there's more I can do because they are in the U.S., and they do have to answer to U.S. authorities. So I'm not going to tell you now exactly what I'm doing, but I will tell you this. I have made a contact with somebody who is interested in this situation, and this contact is going to have this investigated. That's all I'm going to tell you right now. This is not someone I personally know, but it's a contact I made over this matter who has the authority to get this matter investigated. So PrizePicks is about to be investigated over this matter. Maybe something will come of it. Maybe it won't. That's out of my control. All I can do is present this as clearly as possible, and then hopefully the situation resolves itself properly. And I'm not talking about getting my $20. I'm talking about PrizePicks getting in some kind of hot water over this because they deserve it. So anyway, I recommend that you cash out of PrizePicks if you were already there and boycott them over this matter because it's very shady and it just shows that they're looking to cheat people. And that's not a company that should have your business. So I'm not going to play on there again. I am now exclusively playing on Underdog and DraftKings, who have acted ethically with me, and I have not heard of any major complaints about them in this realm or really any realm recently. I know DraftKings had some controversy of some other things, but DraftKings and Underdog, as far as I'm concerned, are okay. So that's where I'm playing. They are straightforward there. There's no trickery. There's no double opting in. When you do opt into a promo, it's very clear when you do and don't have the promo. They don't screw around. That's what I want. So that's where I suggest you play if you're going to do this sort of thing. Do not play DraftKings. And their promos are the worst anyway in the industry. So screw them. And if you think that they were not doing something wrong here, then I can only imagine how often you get screwed in other things in life. Because when companies can convince you that you are the problem, when they intentionally mislead you, then you're going to get screwed a lot of times. You've got to have the ability to look at a situation and say, should I have known this? Would the average customer have known this? Or was I being tricked? Was I being scammed? Was I being semi-scammed? Was I being misled? And if the answer to that is yes, then you should fight to have them make it right. You should not blame yourself. Customers love blaming themselves. They love thinking, okay, well, if the company says I'm wrong, and if they show me some rule they have to where I shouldn't get this, I guess they're right. A lot of people fall into that trap. Do not be a terms of service monkey, as I'd like to say. Of course, this is not even being a terms of service monkey, because the terms of service back me too. Their own fine print backs me on this one. Oh, boy. I just hate seeing companies so egregiously doing crap like this and thinking they can get away with it and being so arrogant, even when you ask for as little as $20 free play and they give you a big fat middle finger and say, nope, we follow all regulations and you get nothing.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk about another sportsbook-related matter. This one did not affect me personally. It's something I read about. And I have discussed a similar topic before, but I keep having people bring this to me. And I appreciate when people bring me topics, by the way. I love when people bring me topics either by text or by email or on the forum, whatever it might be. If you want to bring a topic for me to cover, I'm happy to receive it from you, whether I end up covering it or not, because a lot of the topics I cover here are brought to me by other people, especially ones that are not super mainstream topics that otherwise I might miss. So this one I definitely want to talk about because people will read something like this or watch a report about this in the news and assume that it's a slam dunk that the gambler got screwed. And they say, well, who would cover that topic? Who would be the type who would make a big deal about this company screwing the gambler? And they think of me. And that's a good person to think of because usually I will if the gambler's getting screwed. But I'm a fair guy. I am not a player advocate. Some people think I'm a player advocate. I am not. I am a fairness advocate, meaning that I take the side of whoever I believe is correct. So if the gambler's correct, I take the gambler's side. If the company's correct, I take the company's side. I will not default to take the side of the gambler. So I'm going to play you a news report from CBS News Chicago, obviously a major television station there. And this is about a guy from the suburbs of Chicago who thought he had a ticket that was worth $389K if it won, and it did win, but it turned out they canceled his ticket before the games began, and he ended up getting nothing. So let's listen to this, and I will give you my commentary.
Big money is on the line tonight as March Madness begins. The American Gaming Association estimates the college basketball frenzy will bring in $3.1 billion in bets this year.
One suburban dad wants to warn you, though, as he's left feeling ripped off to the tune of $400,000. Our Lauren Victory looks at how his would-be winning bets disappeared right before his eyes.
When I first got back from my second deployment,
veteran Mark Aiello took a gamble on civilian life when he started a family and moved back to the Chicago suburbs.
I've really enjoyed my time in the Navy, and I'm enjoying my next chapter here.
The next chapter looked especially bright a few weeks ago because of basketball.
I was sitting here just looking around at my daughter's toys, and I'm thinking like all the things that I could give her.
It was
okay. So right away, this is setting up a very sympathetic picture of this guy in the news. He is a Navy veteran. He's a fairly young guy. He has come back to Chicago to be with his family. He's got a young daughter who's presumably a baby or a toddler. And he's thinking about somehow getting savings to pay for her college one day when she gets there. And he thought from this bet that he was going to have it. So very sympathetic story that a military veteran thought he had almost $400K for a college fund for his daughter. And then it gets ripped away from him. His dreams, his hopes get ripped away, and the young child will suffer for this in 15 years or so.
It's March 2nd, a Chicago Bulls-Indiana Pacers game scheduled for 4 p.m. About 7 hours earlier, Aiello opened up the sports betting app BetMGM and put money on the matchup.
When you have a little kind of skin in the game, it's exciting.
He placed 4 $500 bets on rebounds and assists by certain players. 6 aspects or legs of the game needed to go his way to win. Listen to his odds of cashing in.
350 to 1 is definitely like hard odds to hit, so it's unlikely. Once the game was over, I was just like, my heart was racing. I was incredibly excited.
Because it was Dad's lucky day, by his math, his winning bets banked $389,000, enough for these tiny toes to go to college.
So they showed a picture of his daughter's footprint, that they must have put his daughter's foot in some kind of paint, and then on a cutout of a shamrock, a paper cutout of a shamrock, and it said, "Your lucky charm." So they show these little cutesy things about his young daughter and how this money's really for her one day, to raise your sympathy of the situation. This isn't just some degenerate who got screwed. This is a guy, a military veteran, who was believing this money was coming to him that he could use on his daughter in the future.
I was just thinking about my daughter in that moment.
And a moment was about all it lasted.
I looked at my BetMGM app, and I noticed that it looked weird. Like, all of the bets were grayed out.
They'd been canceled just minutes before tip-off, as if he never gambled at all. No wagers, no winnings.
It's discouraging, and it's confusing, and it makes you angry.
You've been there. You know exactly how he felt.
Yeah, it was devastating.
Chris Benton in Virginia saw...
Yeah, we talked about this guy before, this Chris Benton in Virginia. This Chris Benton had a very similar story. He placed a bet on really, really long odds, meaning it paid a huge amount compared to what he bet if it won, on something that was actually a favorite to win. So that was an egregious mistake by the sportsbook that gave this Chris Benton guy, the second person that they're about to show, that would have awarded him huge money on a small bet because they misposted the odds by orders of magnitude. So I talked about this before on this show, and I said I understand why the sportsbook would not pay him. And I'll get to that when we analyze this, but that was my conclusion at the time. The sportsbook ended up paying him just for PR, as you're going to hear.
Saw big dollar signs through BetMGM in 2023, but the company voided his $214,000 payout a few hours later.
They just kept, spamming me with their terms and conditions about the obvious errors clause.
These wagers were voided due to an obvious error.
Aiello got the same explanation. An obvious error of incorrect or inflated odds is what's keeping him from his nearly $400,000 prize. But the Roselle father is confused because he says a BetMGM trader reviewed at least one of his bets before allowing him to place it.
They took a look and said, yes, this is good to go. They didn't cancel him for 7 hours. So I'm wondering where the obvious error was.
What would the correct odds have been?
Yeah, I don't know.
He never got an answer about that. Neither did Benton.
They said because of their mistake, they could do whatever they wanted to.
The Virginia dad took his story public in this CBS Washington, D.C. story. A few weeks after the broadcast, a BetMGM lawyer called.
We've decided to pay your bets out in full.
What changed? CBS News Chicago asked BetMGM multiple times about both obvious error cases, but never got a straight answer. We learned that the company and other sports betting operators do have to explain obvious errors to the Illinois Gaming Board if a customer files a complaint, which Aiello did.
I was really surprised to see that this has happened to other people.
As he waits for the state to investigate, he's toying with the idea of giving up sports betting for good.
Takes the fun out of it.
Yeah, there's no point anymore.
Lauren Victory, CBS News, Chicago.
That sounds very sad, right? He's going to give up sports betting forever. There's just no point. There's no point. I thought I won $400,000 and I didn't. They took it from me. What's the point? What's the point of the whole thing? I'm quitting. I'm done. No more. This is so dramatic. Okay. I think you can see where I'm going with this, whose side I'm going to be on. So let's break this down. That's what we got to do here. We got to figure out really who's right and who's wrong and why. So what is this obvious error thing? Let's talk about that first. The obvious error clause is something that allows sportsbooks to exist without getting bankrupted and destroyed by some sort of egregious error which allows bettors to take advantage of them. I'll give you a very simple example, okay? Let's say there's a game with the Dodgers against the Giants, and the Dodgers should be a minus 150 favorite, which means you'd have to bet $150 to win 100. But let's say instead of posting the Dodgers as a minus 150 favorite, they accidentally post them as a plus 150,000 underdog. Well, what that means is you would get paid $1,500 to 1 on your bet if the Dodgers won. And yet the Dodgers would actually be a favorite to win here in reality. So a bet that's a favorite to win, something that's going to win more than 50% of the time, you'd get paid $1,500 to 1 in that mistake if you were to bet it. So if I were to see that bet, I'd say, oh yeah, wow, what a deal. So let's say I go place a bet for $10,000 on it at $1,500 to 1. Well, that would require them to pay me $1.5 million of winnings for that $1,000 bet. Pretty good deal for something that's a favorite to win, right? I bet $1,000 to win $1.5 million. And it's actually a favorite to win. It's not a long shot. Now, imagine if not only I did this, imagine if tons of bettors did this before the sportsbook realized the egregious mistake. What could they do? They could literally be out billions of dollars, right? Very easily in this scenario. If it's like $1.5 million they'd have to pay out for every 1,000 bet on something that's a favorite to win, imagine how many people would jump on that and how much they could be on the hook for. It could be really billions of dollars, and they don't have billions of dollars necessarily. So this could destroy the sportsbook. So how do you ensure that this doesn't happen? Because these errors will occur and have occurred in the past. So how do they protect themselves? Well, the way they protect themselves is the obvious error clause, which is very fair. And that is any line that's posted on the sportsbook that is so far off from what it should be considered an obvious error, where the person betting is expected to know that they're taking advantage of an obvious error, that the sportsbook does have a right to invalidate it and give the money back before the game begins. That's what the obvious error clause is. It is not a free roll. It doesn't give the book the ability to not pay you after the game starts and they haven't canceled the bet. But they do have a right to undo the bet before the game begins and say it was an obvious error, give you your money back, and then, of course, you have a right to rebet it at the correct odds. Now, there is no exact figure for what constitutes an obvious error and what doesn't, because sportsbooks do make just mistakes in setting bad lines. In fact, we just talked about one recently on this show. On the last episode, we talked about the listener of Poker Fraud Alert Radio who came to me and said that Bovada gave a plus 250 payout, which means 2.5 to 1, on TikTok being banned in the U.S. in 2025, which did happen, and that he bet that for around $25K, and then should have won around $62K for a total of $87K, and they claimed, even though it did get banned, that it didn't get banned and his money was still held up there and was probably going to lose. So it was an $87K matter. And because of the publicity I brought to it on social media and on Poker Fraud Alert, he did get paid, as I mentioned last time. But why was I on his side there? Well, because that was not an obvious error for a few reasons. Number one, they never canceled the bet. Bovada, their position was it's still an active bet. It was not canceled. So obviously it was not an obvious error, or they would have canceled the bet. Second is it was not so egregious, 2.5 to 1 versus whatever the odds should have been, that they can call it an obvious error. So something where the sportsbook offers a line that's positive expectation, which that definitely was, but is not so far off to where you could think that they just accidentally said it the wrong way and they didn't mean to offer it at that. That is not an obvious error when they just set a bad line because they're just stupid. An obvious error is where the system messes up or a human being fat fingers the wrong thing, and that makes the bet obviously way, way, way positive expectation beyond where any reasonable person could believe that they meant to offer it for that amount. Okay, so there's no legal threshold for what denotes an obvious error, but it's one of these things where you know it when you see it. So let's look at this one. Remember they asked the guy, this Aiello guy, the one this happened to? They asked him what the proper odds should have been, and he said he didn't know. I don't believe that. I think he did know, because that's why he placed these bets. Let's look at what he did, because they showed the ticket on the screen. I know since this is an audio show, you couldn't see what they were showing, but I could see, and I paused it and got as much info out of it as I could. So I saw from his ticket that he got a 350 to 1 payout, or at least he should have gotten it if it were to have gone through. A 350 to 1 payout on what was a 6-leg parlay. And it was a parlay on even money type props, very similar to what I was talking about before, where you're predicting whether players get over or under certain stats. So he did 6 of those on one ticket, where all 6 had to hit in order to win. And if any fewer than 6 hit, then the ticket would lose. So if he hit all 6, he would get paid 350 to 1, which is known as plus 35,000. 350 to 1 odds. A typical 6-leg parlay, just like that, on even money type propositions like this, where it's considered the same chance by the sportsbook whether it wins or loses, that would pay 45 to 1. That's what typically would be paid, and you can Google that, and that's known as plus 4,500. So 45 to 1 versus 350 to 1. Well, that's almost 8 times the correct odds, and that's a lot. That's not super, super egregious, but I would say that denotes an obvious error. Almost 8 times the payout is very big. And to show you that Mark Aiello must have known this, he slammed 4 different $500 bets on this, and it looked like the bets were very similar to one another. So he did something called round robining, where he probably had a number of players he was betting on, and he probably did a lot of versions, 4 versions, of very similar tickets. So this way, if one player has a bad game, he has 3 other chances to win on tickets that may not have that player. So maybe he took 9 players and rotated them through the 4 tickets to give himself a better chance to win. So he put 4 separate tickets for $500 each on this 350 to 1 odds ticket. And I have a feeling he's not betting $2,000 on that site on a typical day. I just have that feeling that this Navy veteran cannot afford to bet that way. I believe he did it because he noticed that for whatever reason they were giving almost 8 times the correct odds, and this was hugely positive expectation. So that's why he did it. Now, do I blame him for doing it? No. Would I have tried it? Yes. So I don't say he's a bad guy. He doesn't have to worry about BetMGM's bottom line. If they're offering this for almost 8 times the payout that they normally do, he doesn't have to ask, is this an obvious error? Maybe I should care about BetMGM's balance sheet, and I shouldn't try to place this bet and win money at their expense. No, this is BetMGM's responsibility to catch this. So I don't begrudge him for trying. Trying is fine. That's a form of advantage play. If they're going to offer this, and he tries to place the bet, and they accept the bet, and they let the game start, and then he wins, well, tough luck on them, then I'm on his side. But this is one of these things where if they catch it, you can't cry foul, because this was an obvious error, and once they caught it and they canceled it before the game, then, okay, good try, you didn't get by them, you move on. That's it. So I don't blame them for canceling it. In fact, he can't even claim they were trying to free roll him because they canceled it before the game started. And I couldn't see exactly what he bet on, but I saw 3 of the 6 legs of the tickets that he had. And all of these were even money type props. One of them was Matas Buzelis over 12.5 points, Obi Toppin under 9.5 points, and Obi Toppin under 1.5 assists. These were NBA props. And I looked up the stats of these players, and Buzelis was expected to play a lot of minutes in that game. He ended up playing 30 minutes, which is a lot. He's usually a reserve, but he played 30 that game because of injuries to other players. And his points were inflated over his season average. So even though his season average was lower than 12.5. 12.5 was a reasonable over-under either way for that one. And then Obi Toppin was averaging 10.3 points and 1.6 assists, and the line here was 9.5 points and 1.5 assists, very close to that. So those were, again, very likely to be even money type props. So I couldn't see the other three legs of this ticket that would have won, but I bet they were very similar to where these were even money type props. So he put 6 even money type props on this ticket, should have been paid 45 to 1 if it won, and he was being paid 350 to 1, and that's why they canceled it. So nothing happened to these players. It's not like they got news that favored him, and then they canceled it so he didn't win. That would be very unethical. But they didn't do that. Nothing changed about these players or the odds on these players. The only thing that changed is how much they were going to pay for that ticket, and they realized they were offering almost 8 times the payout beyond what it should have been, so they canceled it. So he could have replaced it at the correct odds. And I don't know if he noticed it before or after the game. He claims he noticed after. But that may have just been for dramatic purposes. There's no way to know when he noticed. But had he noticed before, he could have replaced it at the correct odds. But I have a feeling that this was the only day he bet like this. And he does not claim he bets like that every day. I think he noticed it. He noticed the mistake. He took advantage of the mistake. They caught the mistake. They canceled it before the game began. So that's exactly what the obvious error clause exists for. So the fact that they voided the bet before the game began, even though nothing else had changed regarding the players he was betting on, that pretty much proves it was posted in error. Had the game started, then I would be on his side, because then it could be accused of a free roll. Then the argument could be made that they would only catch this mistake if it won, but let him lose the money if he lost. So that's why them voiding it after the game begins would be wrong and unethical and illegal. But voiding it before the game begins, especially with nothing happening to these players that would have changed the odds, that totally makes sense. So nice try on his part. And by the way, he's smart to go to the news media. You know why he went to the news media? Because he wants to get paid. He saw the other guy got paid in a very similar situation. In fact, a situation that was worse than his. So it worked for the other guy. So he figures, hey, I'll make a big deal on CBS News. They're dumb enough to fall for it because it's a good story. And they don't understand it very well. Even if they do, maybe they'll cover it just because it's a good story and they want to get ratings. Worked for the other guy, so why not try? So, okay, you want to take your shot to get paid anyway? Go ahead. I'm not a fan of BetMGM. They do have to have systems in place to be careful this doesn't happen. I don't begrudge them for canceling his bet, but if he wants to try to shame them in the media and he wants to try to place these bets and see if it gets by them and all that. He wants to make his best shot at getting his $389K. You go right ahead, Mark Aiello, and I will not hold it against you. But do you have my support? No. And if I were on the Gaming Commission in Illinois, would I rule in your favor? Absolutely not. You would lose. It's one of these things. You want to try? Great. You want to try to shame him afterwards? Great. But the truth is you didn't really deserve the money. Unlike the guy I talked about on our last show with Bovada and that TikTok bet, he deserved the money. This guy did not. In both cases, the goal was shaming of the company to do the perceived right thing, except in this case, the right thing is actually not to pay him. And in the Bovada case, it was to pay the guy. So see, I took BetMGM's side. After $10,000 was stolen from me through their site, through their own negligence 2.5 years ago, and they were not cooperative about it at the beginning. And yet I still took their side. See how unbiased I am? I want to give you a quick update on the Bovada situation, not the one I talked about with the 87K and the TikTok bet, but the one that I talked about after that on the last show about the tournament underpayments. Remember, I told you that certain tournaments on Bovada during the weekend of March 8th were not being paid out properly, and that on both Bovada and Ignition, which are on the same network, the support was being very dismissive and in some cases denying that any underpayment was occurring in the first place. And we did a big segment about that. I'm not going to rehash all of this, but a lot of players on Twitter came forward and said they got screwed. Snoop Dogg said it. A person named Jamie Freitag said it. And Ruben Costa, who's known as Wug 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 Wug, happened to him. Various other people this happened to. A lot of people came forward and said that they got underpaid and that support was very unsupportive. And they were not given a timetable as to whether this would be fixed and when this would be fixed. And in fact, with some people, support would not even admit that there was a problem. They said that at best they were getting, well, we'll look into it again, but as far as we can see now, everything's fine, which is very infuriating because it was very obvious something was wrong, and hundreds of people minimum were complaining to them, maybe thousands. So this was a massive problem. And they weren't even as much acknowledging it, nor were they acknowledging it on their social media. Ignition finally said so like 4 days in on their social media. Bovada never did. And they were tweeting a lot of other things. So what ended up happening? This did not get a lot of coverage in poker media. It should have. I mean, this should have been a big thing, that the weekend tournaments on Bovada, Ignition, which are very big, that people got massively underpaid, and in some cases not paid at all. I figured it was a glitch and it would be resolved eventually, but for this to be going on and for them to not publicly acknowledge this was very bad. And yet we heard nothing about it from Poker News. We heard nothing about it from Card Player. The only poker media that wrote about this was Poker.org, and it was Haley Hintz who did the article. And of course, Haley Hintz is a great poker journalist, and I have a lot of respect for her. And it makes sense that Haley would be the one to write about this because she is an ethical poker journalist, and she doesn't worry about who's going to be mad when she writes something that's negative about a large online poker operator, where a lot of other poker journalists are afraid to write things like this. And obviously, I'm not afraid to. I just blurt it out there, whatever's going on. I don't care who gets angry. So anyway, it was basically me and Haley putting it out there, nobody else. So it's pretty much crickets from every other poker media. And that's why I said on the last show, that's why you got to listen to Poker Fraudler. You got to read the Poker Fraudler forum. You got to follow my Twitter, because that's where you're going to get the truth. That's where you're going to get the truth of what's really happening out there, not just what the poker media wants you to know, and they don't report the things that they don't want you to know because it's going to piss off ones that might be sponsors or affiliates with them. Anyway, the good news was it did get resolved very shortly after I recorded the last episode. It was resolved. Everyone was paid what they were owed, as far as I'm aware. Now, that did not surprise me. Given the very large number of people affected, could have been thousands of people, it would have been impossible for Bovada and Ignition to sweep it under the rug. And I don't think it was intentional. I don't think they were trying to scam or rip off anybody. I just think that they were incompetent, that this happened somehow, and instead of saying, yep, we're getting like hundreds or thousands of reports about this, obviously it happened, we're going to fix this, guys, just give us time, it's very complicated, we're looking into it. They wouldn't even say that. At best they said, we think it's fine, but we're checking just in case. That's the best we got out of them for 4 days, and finally Ignition said something. Bovada never said anything until they actually fixed it. This was really, really poorly handled from a PR standpoint and also from a customer service standpoint. Understandably, the players were left very rattled and unnerved and almost gaslit that they know they were screwed, and they're being told by support, nope, it's okay. Nope, you got paid the right thing. Nope, your mistake. Sorry. It's all correct. Goodbye. Like, that's really frustrating. Imagine how pissed you'd be if you knew you cashed something and they're telling you did not cash that amount. Like, it's really, really tilting. Imagine days go by and they still stick to that. Even if they make it right eventually, it's very frustrating. So it's also frustrating that most of poker media did not cover this. It's very important for poker media to hold these sites' feet to the fire on matters like these, especially for the unregulated sites like Bovada and Ignition. Because that's the only way we get resolution, is by shaming them on social media and on forums. It's the only way we can do it, because otherwise there's nothing you can do about it. So props to Haley Hintz. Props to Poker.org for carrying Haley Hintz's article. But that's it. That's the only person who wrote something about it besides me. In fact, I do wonder, and I don't want to take anything away from Poker.org, but I do wonder if she did not freelance for them, if this would have been covered there either. But at least when she wrote about it, that they carried it. I'll give them that. But it's very important for poker media to shine a light on this. And this was being talked about all over Twitter that week, the week following the March 8th weekend. And for some reason, only one poker site besides Poker Fraud Alert picked it up, as far as poker media. Pretty shameful. Pretty shameful. I know they can't cover everything, but that one should not have been missed. But anyway, I'm glad people got their money. I'm glad I had a part in shining a light on this and making it clear this was happening. Bovada Ignition did fix it, but their communication was horrendous and their support was horrendous, and they should not let this happen. So a lot of fail all around. Fail by Bovada Ignition system, failed by their support, failed by their PR, and failed by the poker media, other than Poker.org and Poker Fraud Alert, of course. That's your little update, and we shall close that topic and move on. Now time for the segment I am now calling Druff Comments. We've done the segment before, but it hasn't been called Druff Comments. This is technically the first edition of Druff Comments. It's where I play a video of something and I comment on it. It's very simple. This week we're going to do John Oliver. John Oliver, he's been around for a number of years. His show is called Last Week Tonight. And I believe John Oliver used to write for Jon Stewart too. He's a smarmy British guy. And, sometimes he's funny. Sometimes I enjoy his segments. Usually I don't agree. He's very much on the left. But once in a while I agree with him. He did one about civil forfeiture that I definitely agreed with. Usually I disagree. Sometimes I can appreciate the humor in his segments, even when it's a topic I don't agree with. But I really don't like the sports betting one he did. And I'm going to play it to you, and I'm going to comment on it, because I think this was an unfair way he portrayed the industry. And unfortunately, this is a well-watched show. In fact, this sports betting segment has 3.6 million views just on YouTube alone. They reposted it on YouTube. It originally aired on HBO on his Last Week Tonight show, and now 3.6 million views on YouTube. So that's going to influence a lot of people and their attitudes about sports betting. I'm very aware of all the problem gambling that stems from sports betting, and I know sports betting has ruined a number of marriages and families, so I'm not saying it's not without harm at times, but it is something that a lot of people enjoy doing, and adults should have the right to do it just as adults have the right to spend irresponsibly in other ways. You wouldn't want it to be illegal to spend too much money on vacation, or spend too much money on a nice car, or spend too much money on a house that you really can't afford. I mean, these things are all allowed. So why restrict the ability to sports bet? It's all really the same thing. It's preventing adults from doing what they want with their money. And I'm not a believer in that. I don't think that's right. And that's not really a political view. That's just a view about government's role in your life. So I'm going to play at least parts of this to you, and I'm going to stop it every so often and comment on it. This is Sports Betting Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, originally airing on HBO about 2 weeks ago.
Our main story tonight concerns sports, the greatest activity you can do with balls after my favourite activity, reading. That's right, reading with my eyeballs, the balls of the eye, reading. I love to read pornography. Specifically, we're going to talk about sports betting, picking winners and losers. Even animals can do it, like in this video from the Audubon Zoo featuring Super Bowl picks from a penguin, an aardvark, and even this giraffe who correctly picks the Eagles to win. And that wasn't just random, by the way, because immediately afterwards it used its hoof to write in the dirt, Chiefs are playing a guard at left tackle and are relying way too heavily on the blitz. So it knew what it was doing. But sports betting is clearly not just for animals anymore, as you've no doubt been reminded by approximately 10 million ads.
You want to make every game interesting? Step one, open the BetMGM Sportsbook.
I'm loving the live betting on DraftKings.
Hey guys, ESPN Bet is here. Finally a sportsbook from your favorite sports brand.
We are all season! Only from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Yeah, those ads are everywhere, and they feature every imaginable scenario, from Jamie Foxx in what in any other circumstance would be a pretty great R&B video, to America's whitest little brother talking to himself in a mirror. And you're not crazy for thinking those ads are inescapable. Sports betting companies spent over $430 million on national TV ads last year, and they can do that because this is now a massive industry. We talked a bit about sports betting back in 2015, and at the time, we focused on fantasy sports websites and their efforts to circumvent anti-gambling laws. But since then, 38 states have legalized sports gambling, and currently 30 states and DC allow some form of online betting accessibility. In fact, between 2018 and 2023, nearly $300 billion has been wagered on sports gambling markets. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you gambling is bad. It kind of is, but I'm not going to tell you that. Gambling is also fun, especially if you're good at it, which no one is, but it is fun. playing poker with your friends, taking part in an office March Madness bracket.
Let me stop it right here. See, he's saying that nobody's good at this. So first of all, that's just incorrect. There are professional sports bettors who make a living at it. There are professional poker players, as you know, who make a living at it. So to say nobody's good at it and everyone loses is already a mischaracterization. It is true that most people who sports bet, the vast majority, lose. It is true that most people who play poker overall lose. But already he's trying to say that everyone is going to be a loser.
Even taking a weekend trip to Vegas. For most people, these can be fun, generally harmless things, but they also tend to be time or location dependent. The thing is, with modern betting apps, you can gamble all the time on just about anything, and people do, as this local news story from Oregon shows.
Last year, Oregonians wagered $57 million on table tennis, making it the fourth largest draw for sports gamblers, behind professional basketball, football, and baseball.
To give you an idea of how prevalent this is, right now in Poland, which is, I believe, 10 hours ahead of us, there are 3 different live matches going on.
Unlike other sports, there's always action. Matches don't last long, and in-game betting lines change fast. One of the biggest bets, February of last year. In the wee hours of the morning, a sports bettor in Oregon put down $35,000 on this match in Poland between 2 relatively unknown players in an empty gym.
This is like the crack cocaine of sports gambling.
Well, that is never a great sign. No one ever uses crack cocaine to describe something positively. What more can you say about Diane? She's the first teacher in the doors every morning and the last to leave at night. She genuinely cares about her students. She's basically the crack cocaine of the science department, and that is why she's our Teacher of the Year. Get up here, Diane. Our students would do literally anything for you. Now, unsurprisingly, the rise of online sports betting has been found to correlate with a rise in gambling harms, with one study showing that in states that allowed it, there was a 28% increase in bankruptcies, translating to about 100,000 extra bankruptcies a year.
All right, let's stop that a second. Hold on. See, this is a big problem. This is where I have a huge problem, okay? Much bigger than the thing he said that nobody's good at gambling. It's kind of a joke, kind of a half joke, but this is a big problem. Did sports betting really cause 100,000 extra bankruptcies a year? Well, I want to see these statistics and how they came to them. And let me tell you my theory. What happened around the same time? I mean, a little bit later, but in around the same range of time since the late 2010s when they started to legalize sports betting in states other than Nevada between then and now. What was something that happened kind of in the middle of that whole thing? Oh, that's right. COVID. And didn't we have a lot of economic harms during COVID? And didn't we also have a lot of inflation during COVID? Didn't a lot of businesses fail during COVID? Now, you think that might have something to do with all these extra bankruptcies rather than sports betting? But see, he doesn't say that. He doesn't say 100,000 extra bankruptcies each year that were attributed to sports betting. He didn't say that. He leaves that part out and lets you think that's what he means. Instead, he's just saying there was an increase in bankruptcy during the years when sports betting was allowed. Well, that's stupid. There's also been an increase in cancer during the years sports betting was allowed. It's true. Look it up. Does that mean that sports betting causes cancer? Obviously not. But you could make the same stupid conclusion. So this is where it gets really intentionally misleading. And the way they're putting it, they know what they're doing.
Given we're about to enter March Madness, one of the single biggest gambling events of the year, when over $3 billion is expected to be wagered, we thought tonight it might be a good time to look at sports betting and ask a few things. How it became so ubiquitous, why it can be so damaging, and what fixes might be possible. And let's start with the fact that until fairly recently, sports leagues took great pains to distance themselves from gambling, even forbidding Las Vegas from having its own sports team. In fact, in 2003, Vegas simply tried to buy a tourism ad during the Super Bowl, but the NFL rejected it on the grounds that the NFL has a long-standing policy that prohibits the acceptance of any message that makes reference to or mention of sports betting, successfully solving the one problematic thing about the NFL. The shift from that point to where we are now happened both gradually and then all at once. First, there were the rise of those fantasy sports sites like DraftKings and FanDuel, and then in 2018, this happened.
Now sports betting won't stay in Vegas. The Supreme Court today struck down a federal law that required most states to ban it. The 6-3 ruling declared the federal law unconstitutional, a violation of states' rights.
Well, it was. That's the truth. That was a good ruling. It was crazy to me that sports betting was only allowed in the state of Nevada. It is definitely a violation of states' rights. That's the U.S. government saying Nevada gets an extra advantage. Nevada gets to offer sports betting. Other 49 states, too bad, you can't. You may want to, but you can't. Nevada gets the benefits out of it. You guys don't. So, of course, that was unconstitutional. That was correct. That was a correct ruling. And then that opened it up to the state governments to decide whether they wanted sports betting in their states. And the ones that wanted it could have it, and the ones that did not want it did not have it. Sounds good to me.
Ruling opens the door to an explosion in betting on pro and college games of all kinds.
Okay, first, from now on, all Supreme Court rulings should be announced like that, like a detective spreading out the blurry headshots of suspects on his desk. And while most of those faces in the concurrence make sense, Elena Kagan is a bit of a surprise, although, and I'm not saying this has anything to do with it, she apparently plays basketball on a court in the Supreme Court building and has, and I quote, a devastating layup and jump shot. Cases come and go, but ball is life.
See, he's making a joke here, but he's mad at Elena Kagan because she's a liberal. And John Oliver, being a liberal, is very, very disappointed that this anti-sports betting agenda that he's pushing was not supported by Elena Kagan. And the reason is because, number one, this is a states' rights issue in the court. And number two, this is not really a partisan issue. This is not a thing where one side supports it and one doesn't. This is something where you have people on both sides of the aisle with opposite positions from one another within their same side. It just is something that's really split across political lines. So it's not surprising that you have liberals who support people's rights to be able to sports bet, and you have conservatives who are against it, and vice versa. But I see that he's very disappointed about this. He wanted to say Republicans bad, liberals good, look at the bad thing Republicans do, and he couldn't say it because Elena Kagan was one of the people who was supporting this.
The point is, that ruling left it up to each state whether to legalise sports betting, and those fancy sports companies were suddenly incredibly well positioned to mount lobbying efforts to get it passed. And they weren't alone in that. Some team owners were on boards too. Here's the owner of the Washington Capitals and Wizards making the case for sports betting being legalised.
Let's bring these dollars into the sunlight. Let's let it be regulated. Let's let it be taxed. Let's use it for the good instead of calling it gambling and gaming and giving it a bad name.
Wait, what? I get the let's do it legally and tax it and everything, but for the record, people call it gambling and gaming because that is what it is.
I mean, he's right about that. It is gambling. But the statement the guy made was true. That, yes, you should try to get these bets made on legalized and regulated sites within the U.S., and then you don't have to worry about shaming Bovada into paying out correctly. Now, of course, the regulation has to be done correctly, which it sometimes isn't, but that's still better than no regulation. And also, the reason these leagues were once against sports betting is now obsolete. The reason they were against it is back in the old days when the players were not paid very much. It was very tempting for some of these players to throw games. Nowadays, even though there are the occasional stories about players who are throwing something in order to help someone win, this usually occurs only on props where you're betting on one particular player. As far as the whole team itself, this is never going to happen where a major player on a team who's going to have a major impact on the team's results is going to throw it because they're risking too much for too little. They're being paid so much every year in all the pro sports, in baseball and basketball and football and hockey. They're being paid so much to play and to have their athletic career, which they've hit the top of if they're in the top league of their respective sports. They're not going to risk it for some small payout. You know, whatever could be gained, whatever they could be bribed to throw the game would never be enough to risk their lucrative career, especially the players who would have a major impact on the game. Could you see LeBron James throwing a game because someone bribes him? Obviously not. Could you see Shohei Ohtani throwing a game because someone bribes him? Obviously not. Because if they were caught doing this, it'd be the end of their career, and they would lose a fortune from doing so. Even the players who are much lesser known than those two would not do it. They just have too much money at stake to where it would not be worth it. Whereas in the old days, it was worth it if you were willing to do it because the players weren't paid that much. That's pretty much a built-in guarantee that these pro players are not going to do it, except in these rare cases where you'll have some minor players stupidly agreeing to throw something to allow some prop to win, which is not going to have a huge effect on the game itself, but on that particular bet it will. We had a story like that recently, but those eventually get caught, and that's the end of them. And I think those are pretty much going to go to zero pretty soon anyway, because they just don't work. The problem is if you put a lot of action on one prop that normally wouldn't get a lot of action, that turns heads, and it gets reported and it gets figured out. So really there's no good way to do this, to bribe players in order to throw games at this point. It just wouldn't work without being caught very quickly, and most of them would never do it. So that'd pretty much take care of it, and that's why the leagues are for it now. The leagues are also for it because it increases interest in their games. Let's go on.
You want to rename sports betting to what exactly? Fun with numbers and screens? Banks and balls? Max? That last one is kind of taken, but I know a guy who's probably willing to sell it to you. Now, in that owner's particular case, his interest may have had something to do with the fact that the Wizards are an absolutely terrible basketball team. And a good way to get people to keep watching teams, even bad ones, is by letting them put money on games. Okay,
that's true, but what's wrong with that? If people want to put the money on the games and this brings interest to these teams that otherwise nobody's going to be watching, why not?
The commissioner of the NBA openly admitted.
The data is clear that if somebody has a bet on a game, even a small bet, they're much more likely to engage in that match. They're much more likely to watch it. They're more likely to watch it for more minutes. They're more likely to be interested in the participants and to follow the sport. So there's no doubt there's a business component to this.
He's right. Patrick Stewart's tether is completely right. People will always be more engaged if they have a vested personal connection in what they're watching, whether that's someone who studies a game more carefully because they've got money on the line, or a person who is more invested in a school play because their child is in it, all the way up to the most involved spectator, a parent who somehow has money on the outcome of their kid's school play. You put $20 on the Shrek musical? You put it on Shrek to lose? Buddy, seek help. Allowing gambling was a big win for sports leagues, who not only benefited from increased fan engagement, they also got to enter into lucrative licensing deals. The NFL alone made $132 million last year from gambling-related sponsorships. That is the equivalent of adding 2 to 3 NFL teams and their sponsorship revenues to the league. And it doesn't even count the additional $120 million a year the NFL gets from licensing their data to sportsbooks to help set odds. The influence of these companies on sports now is just unmistakable, and it is not just the ads. Logos of the companies are on the field, or on the floor, on the uniforms, and even on whatever the fuck those ice scrapers are called at hockey games. There are also sports books now built on the premises of Wrigley Field and other venues. And if you go to an Eagles game, gambling QR codes are displayed on scoreboards, allowing you to make instant bets on the next play without leaving your seat.
Okay, so what's the problem with all this? I'm still not missing the issue here. That they're making it available and they are advertising it? Because why does that matter? If they want to advertise this so people can be aware of it and where to gamble and how to gamble, and if they want to make it easier for people to do, then why not? It's the type of thing you either allow or don't allow. If it's this awful thing that shouldn't be allowed, then don't allow it. If it's fine, then allow it. I don't think there should be this thing where it's allowed, but it can't really be promoted enough, or you can't promote it too much, or you can't promote it in certain places. That's stupid. Either allow it, and they can promote it all they want, or don't allow it. So it's allowed, at least in the states where it's legal, and they can promote it all they want. So I don't really care that it's appearing everywhere. It's fine. What does he think? That if they don't promote it as much, and if they don't make it easy to do, that there's not going to be addicted gamblers? Because there will be. If people want to gamble, they'll find a way. And what about everything else in life that can lead to bad decisions that would cause you to go broke? I know people who've gone broke in so many different ways from bad financial decisions. bad investments, overspending, just so many different ways, giving their money away to people who are irresponsible with it. I mean, I could name so many different reasons I've seen people go broke that have nothing to do with gambling. Mistakes I would not make myself, but I see people make. You're going to make those illegal too? In general, adults should be allowed to spend their own money. The only time I feel that they shouldn't be is if there's some kind of scam or something misleading that is taking their money in a way that they're not aware of. That should be illegal. But as far as allowing an activity which can be addictive, that is not something the government should stop.
Which, let me be clear, I do not think is a good idea in sports arenas, but I would welcome it in restaurants so I can scan a QR code on the menu and place a bet on daughter or girlfriend. When an old rich guy comes in with a much younger woman, okay, let me see, same hair colour, she's wearing sensible flats and she's cutting his steak for him, okay, I'm going to go all in on daughter. Fuck! Oh, fuck! And
he's showing them kissing there.
Broadcasters have got really comfortable with folding betting content directly into their programming.
A look at our FanDuel live lines. The spread at 13.5.
The over-under for the Dodgers at 103.5.
Here's a look at the pregame odds for first period total goals.
The problem I see with these odds is some of them are horrendous. Like I saw one that was like minus 144 on one side and minus 108 on the other side. That's my issue, is when the odds suck. When the juice is so high that people are not going to win if they're placing it at those odds. That's the issue I have. That's the only issue I have with these legalized books, that the odds are so awful and a lot of the people either don't realize it or don't care. If there's anything that should be regulated, it should be the odds that are offered to where people at least have a shot.
Tonight, that line was set at 1.5.
It is time for the Big Game Playbook, brought to you by ESPN Bet Sportsbook. Our betting expert, Aaron Dolan, is here. So, Aaron, we are going to pick wagers. You'll have one, I'll have one, Rex will have one. That'll be our parlay.
Oh, by the way, I don't know if John Oliver's going to comment on it here, because I'm watching this clip for the first time along with you. I've known about it, but I've wanted to watch it along with you guys so I have genuine, first-time reactions. Anyway, this Aaron whatever, that's the sports betting expert, is a very pretty young woman with long blonde hair. And I'm seeing a lot of this where these very pretty girls, who are always young too, are placed as supposed sports betting experts, and you're supposed to listen to them. And it's not that a pretty young girl cannot be good at sports. Of course she could be. But I have to think in a lot of these cases that these girls are just being put in front of the camera and told what to say, and are kind of just actresses that are trying to get any position, and that they're really not coming up with their own picks, especially because none of these girls tend to have a history where they kind of come up in the sports betting world and you watch them be successful and then they just happen to be young and pretty. They just kind of appear out of nowhere, and these really pretty girls under 30 happen to be sports betting experts, and they happen to quickly get some kind of high profile either on social media or on TV, and you're supposed to believe what they have to say. Let's see if John Oliver makes any comment along these lines.
Oh, come on. I don't want to hear from the betting expert before a game. I want the integrity of the broadcast to be maintained right up until the moment we get to see a breakfast pastry descending into a giant toaster and accepting its own death before emerging from it, only to be horrifyingly devoured by the victorious team. That is what I want from serious sports broadcasts, and to its credit, the Pop-Tart Bowl gave it to me. The point is, the predictions of the most optimistic team owners clearly came true. It's
sad that John Oliver is so politically correct. He cannot make a joke like that. I had a feeling he couldn't make a joke. He was thinking that. He was thinking I bet she's not really a sports betting expert. I bet this is just like a model they hired to read a script. He can't say that, though, because I guess it's considered sexist. And again, just for those of you that are getting offended here, it's very possible for a girl who's pretty and under 30 to be successful at sports betting if they put their mind to it and have a mind for such things. I just noticed that they tend to ascend into prominence almost instantly, whereas that really isn't possible in sports betting, to just kind of show up and be an expert when nobody knows you. So that makes it very suspicious to me. If I saw a woman in the sports betting community kind of demonstrate that she knows what she's doing and then becomes famous for it, okay, great. Just like If I see a dude doing that, okay, great. But you know, they're not going to just promote some random dude out of nowhere and say he's a sports betting expert, because there's no point. People don't want to look at him. But John Oliver can't mention that because, that type of humor is not allowed anymore.
Instead of gambling happening in the shadows, it is now firmly above ground, and they're getting to profit massively from it. But crucially, the fact it's now available through apps on your phone has fundamentally changed the nature of betting in some very key ways.
For decades, sports betting was limited to betting on just the games. Who would win, how many points the team would score, who will cover the spread. In-game betting allows the user to bet throughout the game.
This is advertised at you the whole game long. It keeps you thinking about betting and involved in betting throughout the game. And if your bet loses mid-game, then you're pitched another bet to try to recoup your losses.
It's true, you can be constantly nudged to bet on everything from who'll score the next point to what colour the Gatorade they pour on the coach will be. And look, insofar...
They're not nudging you to bet. Who's nudging you? How are you being nudged? There are live bets where you can click on the live betting section and then look at what live bets are being offered. And I find those are kind of annoying because you place something and then everything changes so quickly. They change the odds so quickly, and then the whole thing freezes and won't let you place the bet. So the bet you think you are placing doesn't go through. Then the odds change. You have to decide if you want to do it and say, okay, I still like it. You place it. It doesn't go through again. I find it very frustrating. By the way, I'm going to reveal something. Here. I wouldn't say it's a secret, but a lot of you don't know. There is an exploit that some people use against these sports books where the live betting is not fast enough to change the odds. So you have people that actually go to games and place live sports bets on the game they're at based upon what they see happening in front of them before the live book can basically get the message that something's changed. And then they place a bet based upon something they see has already occurred or is very likely to occur. So, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're at a baseball game again. Let's say it's Dodgers versus Giants, and you're there at Dodger Stadium, and the Dodgers are behind 4-2, and they have 2 runners on base. And then Teoscar Hernandez hits a 3-run homer. Well, if you get the live bet in on the Dodgers to win the game when the live book still thinks they're 2 runs down rather than now 1 run up because of the home run, then you can get an underdog line on the game when they should be a favorite because they're actually ahead 5-4. But if you bet fast enough as you watch the ball leave the bat, you know it's going to go out, then the book won't know this yet, and they'll give you the line based upon it being 4-2 Giants. So there are people who do this until the sports books catch on and ban them. So that's a little trick some people use in live betting where they actually go to the games and bet live.
As far as any gambling requires skill, picking Gatorade colours really doesn't. You're not a brilliant strategist, you just got lucky and chose orange. It's the skill of a giraffe picking a Super Bowl winner without the sexual tension. Respectfully, that's a lot of neck what goes on there. Disrespectfully, what those little horns do. Apps also heavily push more complicated types of bets to customers, like parlays, where multiple different things have to happen for a bet to pay off. For instance, you might bet that the Warriors will win, Steph Curry will score 30, Draymond will get at least 1 3, and GP2 will be dressed like the basketball hamburglar. If all 4 of those things happen, you win big, but if only 3 hit, you lose your whole bet. People love parlays because there is a chance they might pay off huge. Companies love parlays because they generally don't. Experienced gamblers actually call parlays sucker bets because of just how seldom they pay off. In fact, one study of 3 states with legalized gambling found that while parlays made up just over a quarter of all money wagered, they make up over half these companies' revenues. And what that means is ordinary people are getting exposed to extreme levels of gambling they might never have otherwise encountered. And it's now especially popular among young men like this guy.
Chance Bulmer is in his last year at the University of North Carolina studying business.
And today's the first day of March Madness. How many bets did you have today?
A lot. I used all the promos today, so I don't know, maybe 10, 12 parlays.
How important is it that you can do this through a phone as opposed to going to a sports book?
It definitely makes me a lot more inclined if I do it from my phone or laptop than physically going somewhere to place the bet.
How many times have you actually gone and placed a sports bet somewhere?
Maybe never.
Well, okay, but why does that matter? What they're basically saying is, if we make it really inconvenient for you to place the bet, then you're going to gamble less. Again, that's focusing on the wrong thing. It's either should be allowed or not allowed. And if it's allowed, it should be as easy as possible. It actually shouldn't be hard.
Right. Chance Bulmer was never going to physically go somewhere and bet in person. How would he when he'd have to first find his keys? Just based on Chance's general vibe, he has no idea where his keys are. Did he leave them at Brian F's dorm or Mike P's apartment or while chilling at Brian M's house? There's no way of Chance knowing where those keys are. But the promos he mentioned there can be appealing. A lot of these sites offer free money if you sign up, although you should know they have tons of fine print. A lawsuit in Massachusetts alleges that a DraftKings offer of a $1,000 bonus was only redeemable if a customer were to deposit 5 times that amount and then within 90 days place $25,000 in bets. And that's not the only way young gamblers can get reeled in. Because while some states don't allow people to sign up for sportsbooks until they are 21, there are apps specifically designed to get around that.
I'm very excited about March Madness.
19-year-old Chase Lavasser loves sports. He's too young legally to gamble in his home state of Massachusetts, but he gets a fix with his friends on Fliff.
You're using a fake currency that you turn back into cash if you win, hopefully.
Fliff advertises as free to play, though there's an opportunity to buy Fliff coins and potentially win cash. It's a sweepstakes model that skirts most states' gambling regulations. Age limit 8.
We're going to talk about the sweepstakes poker sites later in the show. And yeah, I've got some issues with that, and they're probably going to be illegal pretty soon. And Fliff has gotten some criticism, so, whatever. This is just another thing that John Oliver's throwing out, the kind of a semi-shady thing to say the whole industry is terrible, which isn't fair.
18 and older.
Yeah, it's not gambling. It's a social free-to-play sweepstakes with microtransactions that pay out real cash if you win. Available to teens when their brains are the most impressionable. What could possibly go wrong there? Also, for what it's worth, Fliff might be one of the most upsetting words I have ever heard. It sounds like either one of the most innocent things imaginable, like a helpful cartoon chipmunk, or that little bit of flour that's on top of freshly baked bread, or something so disgusting it has its own Pornhub page with videos like stepmom Jessica Shine gets fliffed by personal trainer and his college advisor Rod Steele. But whether you are wagering money or fliff bucks that can become money, sports betting can completely change your relationship to the sport that you are watching. And that is something that is not lost on professional athletes, who can get a lot of gambling-related abuse online, as NBA player Tyrese Halliburton points out.
I mean, if I were to look at my mentions right now, I'm sure the majority of them are about me fucking up somebody's parlay. I mean, LeBron, more than likely, if I have a good game, it's just like, yeah, you're supposed to. If you have a bad game, it's like, why'd you fuck up my parlay? It's like, I'm sorry, John.
Right. I can see why that would be annoying. Even when you do your job right, people just jump into your mentions with aggressive complaints, whether it's fans yelling nonsense at Tyrese over their stupid parlays, or viewers in my mentions saying ridiculous things like, talk slower, or for God's sake, take a breath, or, hi John, no idea if you'll read this, but I'm a speech psychologist, and what you're displaying is very likely something called pressured speech. And it might be nothing, but it's also something linked to hypomania, ADHD, and bipolar disorder. Please consider seeing a specialist. I'm begging you. Not a fan of the show, just concerned. Just annoying nonsense bullshit that superstars like Tyrese and me have to put up with. And all this gets especially grim when you realise it's possible to bet on college players too. That's about to happen a lot over the next month, especially because universities are now partnering with betting companies in exchange for millions of dollars. And while superstars like Tyrese and me can see random negative comments about our performance and shrug them off with our athletic builds and toned shoulders, it is harder for student athletes to deal with harassment that may be coming from their own classmates. In Ohio, there have been reports of athletes getting Venmo requests from their peers when they lost a game or didn't make a free throw. And others have received horrible messages like, you deserve to get unalive for blowing my bet, and I hope your dog gets cancer. And look, I don't care who you are or what the circumstances, you should never, ever hope a dog gets cancer. Every dog is a good dog who should not have cancer. Now, a cat? Also no, right? Of course.
Let me comment on the college thing. I'll interrupt his speech about hating cats. It is true that college athletes are more vulnerable to possibly being bribed to throw games. But again, there's the same thing that a lot of these college athletes on the major sports where big action would be possibly taken are looking to make the pros. And the last thing most of them would want would be a gambling scandal that could ruin their career before it even gets started. So again, there is a lot that prevents this at this point, given all the money that they would be giving up if they were to be caught, even aside from all the criminal penalties they'd get. But I think it's a pretty weak argument to say because they get some angry messages on the internet when they blow a game from people who lost money, that there shouldn't be gambling because of it. Because, guess what? The pros get that too. So that's a pretty weak argument. But he's pretty much throwing everything at the wall here and seeing what sticks. He's trying to rant for half an hour, say as many bad things as possible at sports betting, and having you come away with, sports betting's awful, it shouldn't be allowed. But what's his position here? It shouldn't be allowed at all? Should we make it completely illegal, and then people have to start doing it online again on sites like Bovada or Bet Online that are not regulated? Or it should only be in Nevada for some reason? Or it should be everywhere but only a brick and mortar? Like, what is he even trying to advocate? I don't understand. He's bashing the industry, but he's not presenting solutions. He's not saying what is right. What should we be doing?
But it's not just young athletes who are having their lives turned upside down by these apps. It's the people who use them too. So let's talk about the damage here, because even studies funded by the gaming industry show that about 1% of US adults have a severe gambling problem and 2 to 3% have a mild or moderate problem. Those might feel like small percentages to you, but it's worth remembering that amounts to somewhere between 7.5 million and 10.5 million people. Basically a population less than Michigan, but more than Tennessee. And that's not a tragic side effect of this industry. It is baked into the business model here. The people who lose the most money gambling are the lifeblood of these apps, as this expert explains.
86% of online gambling profits come from 5% of the gamblers. The gambling industry business model, whether it's state lotteries, regional casinos, online gambling operators, it's based on the addicted gambler.
Well, okay, but that does not exactly mean what you think it means from listening to that statement. Just because 86% of the profits supposedly come from 5% of the gamblers does not mean that these 5% are addicted gamblers ruining their lives. These could just be rich guys who like gambling, because big action is many, many times the size of small action. So I don't buy that as far as evidence that they're really banking off of addicted gamblers. Now, do sports books make a lot of money off of addictive gamblers? Yes, just like casinos. But you could make this argument with anything in the gambling industry. You could say that about Las Vegas casinos. You can say this about really anything that involves gambling. You can say that about poker. Where does the money in poker come from? Well, it comes from players who lose. So if some players win, and of course if the poker room operators make money, then where's the money coming from? It's coming from the losing players. And where does a lot of the money come from? Well, a lot of the money can come from the players who lose the most, the ones who play high stakes and who lose a lot of money at once. You can say this about any form of gambling, that you're going to have the bigger whales who lose a whole lot at one time. You're going to have a lot more people who are smaller or medium players that lose. There's a lot more of them losing, but they're losing a lot less. And a lot of them are addicted gamblers, and that's why they're showing up and losing and coming back. So the solution is either to say gambling is evil and terrible and shouldn't exist and has to be completely illegal, and we'll try to make it so people can't find ways to gamble illegally. Or you can say, you know what, it's going to happen anyway. Let people spend their money how they want. It doesn't make sense to watch how people spend their money in this way but no other way. Every other form of irresponsible spending is fine, but not gambling. And just let it happen, and then regulate it and make sure it's done fairly. That's what should be done, the latter. So again, we're getting no solutions. We're just getting stats thrown at us. We're getting horror stories thrown at us. We're getting bullying stories about college athletes thrown at us. But we're getting no answers. And that's the problem with a lot of John Oliver's segments, is he likes to criticize, but not state the way it should be. It's easy to say, this sucks for this reason, and here's the harm that's being caused, blah, 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 and therefore whoever supports the opposite of what I believe is terrible. But okay, then what is the answer? What should be done differently? You need to say that when you are criticizing anything. And he usually does not. He doesn't in this segment. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. This segment has 14 more minutes to it, but it, of course, would be a lot more than 14 minutes if I play it. If you want to watch the whole thing, it's called Sports Betting Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. I think it's getting kind of repetitive at this point, so I'm going to stop it here. But this was the first official segment of Druff Comments. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will move on. If you want to text me, the phone number is 775-372-8355. From the 507, love the Druff Comments segment as a regular thing, Druff. From the 905, you can't advertise liquor or tobacco. He's talking about on television. Yeah, but see, that was done in order to protect kids. And you could say, well, you can protect them from gambling, but it's different. Because what does gambling require? What do you have to be an addicted gambler? You have to have access to money. And not just money one time. You have to have consistent access to money. Now, the average teenager does not have access to very much money. Maybe they'll get money if their parents give it to them for something, but as far as just on their own, the average teenager cannot just keep gambling because he or she will run out of money very quickly, and that'll be that. Whereas alcohol or tobacco, while that also costs money, it doesn't cost nearly as much money. So someone can develop a drinking or smoking habit, and of course a drug habit, without a constant stream of money that would have to support it. There's some money to support it, but there's not the type of money that would be necessary that would have to support a gambling addiction. So it's different. It's much harder for a kid to get a gambling addiction due to the lack of access to funds compared to alcohol or drugs. So it's not the same thing. Also, these are actual substances that can harm one's body, and gambling is a form of spending money. And if you don't know people who are addicted spenders that have nothing to do with gambling, then I'd be very surprised. Because I've known a number of addictive spenders in my life. Ones who do not gamble at all, but who are always broke because they're always wasting their money. They're always mismanaging their money. I've seen many marriages fall apart because of addicted spenders. In fact, that is the number one reason marriages fall apart. Look it up. That is the number one reason that divorce occurs is because of people who are bad with money, not related to gambling. So why should all of that be legal except for gambling? It just doesn't make sense to me. And to suppress the advertising of it or to make it more difficult, it's stupid. I like to bet on sports. I bet on sports in most days. I do it in a smart fashion, but I still enjoy doing it. And if I had to go down to a sports book to do it every time, that'd be a pain in the ass. And in California, there aren't any sports books, so I couldn't even do that. So if there was no way for me to get online and gamble, I have to do it through these illegal sites. But if I didn't have those, I would think, wow, this sucks. All these other people I know can gamble on sports and I can't. So why should that freedom not exist if it's my money? I can waste my money in any other way I want except that. Wouldn't make sense. Okay, so we're going to move on. We'll talk about Resorts World. What's going on there? Two things are going on there that I want to tell you about. Resorts World, as I'm sure you know, is a fairly new property opened in 2021, a new ground-up property that was supposed to be the next really big thing in Vegas. And it is located in what's charitably called the North Strip, but there's some debate whether that's even considered the Strip at all over there. It is north of the Wynn on the other side of the street. And the question was, could a major casino hotel thrive over there? Because the real action in Vegas is Center Strip. North Strip not only has much less action, but it's considered a has-been. Most of the properties over there are not well regarded. Most people don't want to go there. The area is not as good to walk around at night. And the further north you go, the worse it gets. So could Resorts World buck that and become kind of a new Center Strip in a way? Could this become the new main area that people go to in Vegas, especially with Fontainebleau coming behind it, which is now open as well? So with Resorts World, with Fontainebleau, and even the Wynn over there, though the Wynn is still close enough to Center Strip to where the location is not so much a problem. It's pretty close to Spring Mountain Road. once you get north of that, could that area be viable? Or is it too late for that area? That area once was viable. It once was notable. Circus, the Riviera, which is now gone. If you want to go down the street a little bit east, the Las Vegas Hilton, which was once actually the biggest hotel in the world, believe it or not, which is now called the Westgate. But those are not considered major properties in Vegas anymore. They might be large, but they're not major. They're secondary properties you go to if you can't afford Center Strip. That's why you go to those. So would someone pay a lot of money to go somewhere like Resorts World? Can a high-end resort survive over there? Can multiple high-end resorts survive over there? Well, it looks like the answer might be no. One problem Resorts World has had is that it's just too far out there. It's farther from everything else that people want to go to than they really want to walk. People do not want to stay at Resorts World and walk all the way over to Center Strip. So they just don't go there. And the area isn't that great. It's not horrendous, but it's not that great. And it's even across the street from a Denny's and a strip mall that doesn't exactly look high-end and isn't. So you kind of just feel like you're in a not great area of town and kind of away from the Center Strip tourist area. And some people just don't like the feel of that, especially for a high-end resort, so they just don't want to go. And they have to fill a lot of rooms and a lot of gamblers in that casino and a lot of patrons in the restaurants there to support something of that size. So they need a lot of money coming in every day to even manage to survive. So Resorts World and Fontainebleau have both been struggling, despite being nice-looking properties. Another issue with them is they really don't have any theme. As corny as some of these themes can be in Las Vegas, people enjoy them. And the whole theming of Las Vegas has been disappearing over the years. You might have noticed this, that these casinos are all starting to look the same. That iconic things about them are being taken away. Even kind of pointlessly. Like removing the statue they had in Harrah's of Winnie and Buck and Chip. Or removing Cleopatra's barge from Caesar's Palace. Like, why even do that? Why remove these iconic parts of these casino hotels? But they were. And they are. So there really is a de-theming going on. Look at Treasure Island, which is now just TI now. And the whole pirate theme has been removed, and the pirate show is gone. So if you think about all the different hotels in Vegas that you could stay at now, the theming has been disappearing. And the problem is when the theming disappears is that the property has to really draw people in on its own merits without a theme. And then if it's lacking in some way that's turning people off, people are just not going to go. There's no reason to go over to Resorts World if you can get similar things on Center Strip that you'd get at Resorts World. Why even bother to go over there? Why would someone at the Aria say, hey, you know what? I feel I need to go to Resorts World because Aria just isn't giving me what I want. No one's going to say that because most things you would get out of Resorts World, you would get at Aria. Or you could go across the street to Cosmo. There's a number of options right there of high-end casinos where you can get basically what Resorts World's going to give you. So people don't want to go there. So it's a big problem for them. And it's an additional big problem that the area is not great and they did not buy up the land or attempt to buy up the land of what is across the street and at least make the area look more touristy and high-end rather than just kind of integrating into a locals area of Vegas that isn't a great area. So I was wondering when Resorts World was going to start showing symptoms of its struggles and having to take action because of it. It looks like that time is now. Vital Vegas reported on March 25th. And by the way, Vital Vegas is a biased guy, so he gets real information. He gets real tips. A lot of times he is the first one to hear things, so he does put out a lot of good information. He is also a biased person. He wants certain properties to succeed, certain properties to fail. He has his different reasons for his biases. You know, obviously something is supporting the guy, so I have to imagine certain casinos pay him to backdoor promote them. Certain other casinos he doesn't like either because they've never paid him or because they've done something to piss him off. whatever it is, the guy is very biased in some of these casino matters, and you can see by reading his reports which ones he wants to see work and which ones he wants to see fail. He has been negative on Resorts World, so take it with a grain of salt, but they definitely are struggling. There is something to what he wrote, and in fact there is, for sure, at least partial truth in what he wrote, because some of this has been verified. So this is what he tweeted on March 25th. We told you to gird. He always likes to say gird your loins when he's about to tell you something that is shocking. Hearing Resorts World is gearing up to lay off about 400 people. This goes far beyond the, quote, wholesale changes to executive leadership required by the Gaming Control Board following the resort's money laundering kerfuffle, which we'll explain shortly. This is a reflection of business levels. More to come. Now, he's correct that this probably doesn't have anything to do with the record fine they just paid. These are two separate troubles they're having. One is with gaming and with the embarrassing situation with former CEO Scott Sabella and how shady he was and the violations he committed while CEO there. And the other issue is just that it's not doing well. It's not achieving the business levels they need to be able to survive. So they found themselves overstaffed for the business levels they're getting, and they are laying people off. Vital Vegas was claiming on March 25th that they are going to be laying off about 400 people. Resorts World is claiming a lot less than that. They're claiming it's about 50. I have seen posts on social media from people who have been informed they're going to be laid off. So it's definitely happening. And there has been coverage in the Las Vegas news media about Resorts World layoffs. So this isn't made up or incorrect. Even the Las Vegas Review-Journal has covered it. But they're saying 50 in the Las Vegas media because that's what Resorts World is putting out. I don't know if the 50 number is correct. I don't know if the 400 number is correct. I don't know if it's somewhere in between. Resorts World did not disclose details regarding which portion of their operations are seeing the layoffs. A spokesman for Resorts World said, quote, to best position the company, we have made the difficult decision to restructure a portion of our operations by less than 50 full-time team members. We appreciate the contributions all affected team members have made. The decision is part of our ongoing efforts to optimize efficiency and maximize the exceptional experience we seek to deliver to our guests. Okay, so obviously that's a lot of corporate bullshit speak. They're basically saying, in a lot of words, we can't support this many employees. We have to lay people off because we're kind of failing. So we're letting 50 people go. Now, they said they're letting, quote, less than 50 full-time team members go. They don't say whether or not they're letting go additional people who are part-time team members. Maybe that's the difference between what Vital Vegas heard of the 400 and what they are saying to KTNV Las Vegas and Las Vegas Review-Journal of 50 people. Maybe it's 50 full-time people and 350 part-time people. I don't know. Maybe Vital Vegas is wrong. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. Who knows? But anyway, layoffs are coming, and I really have to wonder if more are going to come because they're just not getting it done there like they thought they would. They really thought this was going to be a major, major success. This was going to change Las Vegas. This was going to move a lot of the action to that area of the Strip. It was not going to just be about Center Strip anymore. And Resorts World has not achieved that. I was actually there in the first few days it opened, and I observed it there. One thing I noticed, and this is back in June of 2021, was that they weren't ready. They wanted to get the post-COVID traffic because what was going on in the middle of 2021? Well, if you think about it, the vaccines had been released to the general public starting around April. So they were starting to take effect in May, and people really wanted to travel in the summer of 2021 after feeling cooped up at home for the past year and a half due to COVID. So people were really, really looking to get out and go places, and one of the places they wanted to go was Vegas. So Resorts World wanted to get in on that action. They already had a lot of delays to opening. So they felt, okay, we're going to open even though we're not ready. So a lot of the rooms had things that were not working properly, and the staff wasn't equipped to handle it, and they did not have the nightclub open yet, and there were a lot of other things at the property that just were not ready yet. So people got there, and they're like, okay, what's the big deal here? It's just another high-end resort. There's really nothing that interesting here. There's nothing really notable happening here. Goodbye. And they left, and that was that. The most notable thing I saw there were these cars, these displays of cars they had in the casino, and for whatever reason they removed those fairly quickly. That's, again, part of the de-theming of Vegas. So I thought the place was nice, but it wasn't anything special I felt I had to run back to, and that's pretty much what everybody felt when they came there. They're like, okay, another high-end resort. We saw it. Not that interesting. We're not coming back. Not that they're never coming back, that they hate it, just we don't see a reason to come back out here. Not only that, but the parking was very confusing, and there were just some inconvenient elements to it. The layout was weird. The area wasn't good. There's just a number of reasons you don't feel like going over there. There was construction on the roads for years. There's a lot of things you just kind of think of going, I don't feel like going down there. Like if it was right here, sure, I'd walk into it, but I don't feel like making the trip down there from Bellagio. I don't feel like coming down from Aria. I don't feel like coming down from Caesars. That's what people think, I'm telling you. So that's why they're failing. And they have 3 towers that they have to fill. The most expensive tower is the Crockford's Tower. Then there's the Conrad Tower, which is the middle tower. And then there's the Hilton Tower, which is the lowest of the 3 towers. But people were surprised how cheap it was getting on the weekdays, because this was supposed to be a very expensive property. And shortly after they opened, it got very cheap there compared to what other properties were selling rooms for during the week. And people are like, wow, I could stay at Resorts World for this much? In some cases, and I talked about it before on the show, you could actually stay at Resorts World in a Conrad room for cheaper than a regular room at Paris, which is crazy, because the Conrad room was better. And Resorts World is a lot newer than Paris, but that's how much they were struggling. I just don't think they really thought this through correctly. They didn't really think about why people are going to come there, why people are going to leave Center Strip to come there, and we're now seeing the results of it. Now, what about the struggles that they've had related to the legal issues? Well, I don't know if that stopped people from coming there, but it definitely is not a good look. But they ended up with a record fine, or actually almost record fine. It was the second largest fine ever, due to a whole money laundering and lack of reporting of source of funds investigation that connected to CEO Scott Sabella and basically what he allowed to occur there. Because Scott Sabella was once at MGM, and it was already over there he started to associate with unsavory characters, so to speak. He had a lot of friends who were bookies or others who were looking to launder money, and he looked the other way as it occurred. And he took that habit over to Resorts World. And this had been reported for a while. You know, as many problems as there are with this Robinhood 702 guy I've talked about before, he was the one who called this a long time ago, saying how shady Scott Sabella was. And there was even some stuff that happened to Robinhood 702 from a legal standpoint that looked like Sabella may have had a hand in orchestrating it. Very, very bad, in my opinion, regarding how all that Robinhood 702 stuff was handled. Even though he's not a great guy himself, and he was a snitch, and this guy's done a lot of crappy things himself. He's not a wonderful person. But I will say that a lot of shady stuff happened to him because he was trying to come forward about how shady Scott Sabella was, and it turned out to be true. But the Nevada Gaming Control Board ended up fining Resorts World $10.5 million for their misdeeds involving Scott Sabella and all of the money laundering allegations. We've talked about it before on this show. The only bigger fine was the $20 million that was against Wynn Resorts due to Steve Wynn and his sexual harassment. I think this fine should have been bigger than Steve Wynn's. I think Steve Wynn got overfined, and it was a product of the times that they felt they had to throw the book against him, it was going to look really bad. It's kind of the Me Too era. Not that what Wynn did was good, and it looked like he was guilty of sexual harassment, and I don't know why he was behaving in such a fashion. I mean, Steve Wynn, if he really wanted to get women, he obviously could have. He didn't need to sexually harass anybody. I mean, you shouldn't ever sexually harass anybody, but if you're Steve Wynn, like, why would you ever even feel the need to do that? Because if he wants women, I'm sure that there'd be plenty of women, including younger women, who would love to be with him just because he's Steve Wynn. So why he was sexually harassing people at the Wynn who were working there, people meaning women, I don't know. And I understand why action was taken against him here. But I don't see why that's more of a serious matter than what happened at Resorts World with all the money laundering. This actually ended up having a connection to the whole Shohei Ohtani scandal, where Shohei Ohtani's assistant and translator was stealing from him to gamble, that the bookies he was gambling with were using Resorts World to presumably launder money. The two bookies that were in the complaint against Resorts World were Matt Boyer and Damian LaForbes. Damian LaForbes had appeared on Hustler Casino Live a few times. And he didn't appear as Damian LaForbes, but I think he was like a DJ Damien or something like that. But that's who it is. He was a bookie. And Matt Boyer did not appear on any of these poker shows. I don't even know if he plays poker. But he was the guy who was taking the bets from Shohei Ohtani's assistant. So this had a direct connection to that whole scandal. And apparently Scott Sabella was very aware of what these guys were doing and who they were and where they had their source of funds. I've explained this before, but casinos are expected by law to know the source of funds for any major gambler there. Now, if you show up at the blackjack table with $1,000, they're not going to ask you your source of funds. It's assumed that small money people they're just going to have that. They're not going to put you through the third degree. Hey, where'd you get $1,000? But anyone showing up with big money to gamble, they are expected to question them as to where the funds came from, and not to shrug their shoulders and go, I don't know, wherever it came from is okay. Welcome, because casinos are often used for money laundering because criminals can bring dirty money into the casinos, gamble big, and then cash out, and the cash out looks like gambling winnings. So then they can claim, we just won this in the casino. So in order to prevent that, the casinos are supposed to look into the source of funds and to deny action to those who cannot show a legitimate source of funds. So not only didn't Resorts World do this properly, but there was a lot of evidence that CEO Scott Sabella was very aware that these two bookies were gambling there with illegally acquired funds. In the original complaint against Resorts World, the Las Vegas Gaming Control Board said that the casino had, quote, an overall lack of control within Resorts World and acceptance among Resorts World executives of a culture where information of suspicious or illegal activity at a minimum is negligently discarded or at worst willfully ignored for financial gain, given the overall pressure for Resorts World to generate revenue, and that the bonuses of Resorts World's executives are directly tied to the financial success of Resorts World. Now, that's probably partially true, but a lot of this was just like Scott Sabella loved hanging around with shady dudes. That's a lot of it too, believe it or not. It wasn't so much that they were under pressure to generate revenue. I mean, I'm sure that's also true. I'm sure there was bonuses given to executives for whatever revenue gets generated and getting whales over there. And yeah, they looked the other way when criminals would go there and launder money. But it wasn't just that. Sabella was forming personal relationships with these bookies and other criminals. And this has been known since his MGM days. So it wasn't just a profit motive. He had some kind of weird motive that he just liked hanging out with those guys. It also noted in the complaint that a casino cage manager recognized that Boyer was an illegal bookie. They knew who he was, and they reported it to the superiors, and that they noted this during anti-money laundering compliance committee meetings. But casino executives ignored those warnings, probably at Sabella's direction. And Resorts World allowed Boyer to keep gambling between 2021 and 2023, even though they knew he was an illegal bookie. He claimed he was a real estate investor, but he never verified that that was his real source of funds. The complaint said Resorts World executives explained to board agents that it should take no longer than 90 days to complete a source of funds investigation. However, Boyer was allowed to play at Resorts World for approximately 20 months without establishing his source of funds, and that his source of funds was consistent with his level of play. So basically what they're saying here is that it is allowed for them to take a little time to investigate sources of funds. If they don't have a specific reason to know they were shady, so like if they knew Boyer was an illegal bookie, they're supposed to deny him action. But if they just don't know, if someone just shows up with a lot of money and says they want to gamble it, they are allowed to take some time to investigate the person, and they don't have to deny their action immediately. But they're supposed to take no longer than 90 days to investigate someone who comes in with big money. And they said that Boyer was gambling there for 2 years, at least 2 years, maybe 3, and that they never verified where the money came from, and indeed the money was really coming from illegal bookmaking. Some of it was Shohei Ohtani's stolen money. In August of 2024, Damian LaForbes pled guilty to federal money laundering and operating an illegal gambling business. Boyer pled guilty in December of 2024 to operating an unlawful gambling business, money laundering, and subscribing to a false tax return. Given that there were other charges at Resorts World, including a known gangster operating a restaurant there, it's actually surprising that their fine was as low as $10.5 million, because there's just been a number of issues over there of them acting in shady fashion. A comment from Richard Schwetz, who is a former California Gambling Control Commission member and a longtime casino executive. He told the publication Nevada Current, quote, "From reading the state complaint, Resorts World gave every appearance of being institutionally out of control. I agree. This is a continuing chapter that indicates that Nevada's regulatory assets have lost the plot. This does not even amount to a wrist slap." So he's basically saying the $10.5 million is nothing compared to a property of that size, which is true, and that if that's all that's being done to them, then they just move on with a small loss of money, and that's it, which is the truth. This is not going to be something that sinks them. This is not their problem. This is not why they're laying people off. $10.5 million is not a lot to them. So this Richard Schwetz felt that they should have had some kind of restrictions placed against them, some kind of sanctions, some kind of action against their license, because they just had a lot of issues over there. They were doing a lot of stuff that was against the law. He called them institutionally out of control, and I agree. Well, I think Resorts World is going to clean up now that Sabella's gone, and they've been hit with this, and they know they can't let lightning strike again. That's not going to fix their business problems. That's not going to get more people in the door. I don't know what their plan is to change things. They can't change the area. I guess they could still try to buy up things across the street and try to make the area more appealing. But they've got some problems that are difficult to fix. Just people don't want to come to that area of town. They're also competing with Fontainebleau. So even those that do might choose Fontainebleau over them. Fontainebleau, of course, is struggling themselves. But now there's two properties fighting for what just is not enough of a customer base. They don't have really a theme that's attracting people. The place is just too large and needs too much revenue per day in order to survive. They're just not getting, and it's kind of just hard to get. But in order to turn things around, they really need to find a way to entice people over there. They need to get creative. And the way to do that is to think about, what does the average gambler want? And what might entice them to actually make the trip over there, whether it's to stay there or to at least come over there for some time from Center Strip or from other parts of Las Vegas. This is not really a casino that can count on the locals market. I mean, the locals can help a little bit, but this is not a locals casino. This is one that's aimed at the high-end visitor from out of town. So how do you get people over there? How do you get people over from Center Strip? How do you get people to choose this property over Center Strip? So they have to get creative. I don't have all the answers here. I guess if I did, I could go work for Resorts World and make a lot of money. But they have to come up with something, or it's not going to change. They can't just sit there and stay the course and hope it gets better, because it's not going to. What could happen if it doesn't get better? Well, we could have a bankruptcy. We could have parts of the place shut down. We could have a sale. I don't think it's going to cease to operate. I don't see this being imploded because it didn't do well. But it eventually could be something that's pared down and operates at a lesser cost and just they concede is not going to be a major property. It has been almost 4 years since it opened, and things are not getting better. Resorts World was actually in the making since March of 2013, and it took over 8 years to fully open. In March of 2013, it was reported in the Las Vegas Review-Journal that the company Genting, who owns Resorts World, they're a Malaysian company, that they bought the site and were going to develop Resorts World over there. But it took quite some time to happen. Did not open for about 8 years. So this is going to be split into part 1 and part 2 in the archives, but I have decided to end part 1 with a recorded interview that I had with my friend Trevor Garner. Now, Trevor was not part of the poker or gambling community. He was a personal friend of mine. I've known him for about 15 years. And Trevor, unfortunately, was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and was in his final days. I went to visit him 3 days before he passed away on March 21st, and I wanted him to tell the Poker Fraud Alert audience the story of his victimization by someone abusing the legal system. And that person who was doing it was a very well-known LA radio host in the 1990s and 2000s. So it's a very interesting story, and I wanted Trevor to tell it before he passed away, which I knew was coming soon, though it actually came a lot sooner than I thought. I thought maybe he had about 2 months left, and it turned out he only had about 3 days left, and he is now gone. So this was an interview I recorded in his hospital room when I visited him on March 21st, and I'm going to put it at the end here on part 1. And then part 2 is going to be coming within a few days. It has already been broadcasted and recorded. I just have to edit and throw it in the archives. So here we go. Okay, so this is the first time I'm doing this, and this is being pre-recorded, this segment. But I am here actually at a hospital in Orange County, and I'm with my friend Trevor Garner. And you guys don't know him, most of you, because he's not involved with poker, he's not involved with gambling, he doesn't live in Las Vegas. But he's someone I've known for about 15 years. And I know him from kind of like the radio world. And there's an interesting story involving him. And I had a little part in it, but I've never talked about it before. And it involves actually a major LA radio personality, who's not anymore, but a major former LA radio personality. And a very shitty thing that was done to Trevor by this personality. And it's a very interesting story. And I've been tempted to tell it out here before, but I just didn't. And I think now is the time, because unfortunately, Trevor has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And he's 59 years old. I'm here visiting him in the hospital, and he doesn't have much time left. And I wanted to tell this story here and interview him about this from his room, and have him tell you some parts. I'll tell you most of it because it's easier for me to talk. He's very sick right now. But I wanted this story out, and I thought that's a good thing to put out there to introduce him to the Poker Fraud Alert audience. So the person I'm talking about, the radio host, the LA radio host, who also was heard in some other markets like Seattle, is Tom Leykis. And Tom Leykis, he had a fairly long career in radio. And at first he just kind of ran generic sort of political talk shows in LA, but he really reached his stride with a show he had on a station called KLSX 97.1, which became Talk at some point in the 90s. And the format of that show is basically him giving advice to young men about getting women and not spending money on them and getting laid and not letting women take advantage of you. By modern day standards, it would be considered a misogynistic show. Even I noticed that at the time. You guys know I'm no feminist, but even at the time I noticed that it seemed like he hated women. It seemed like a lot of the advice I found kind of dishonest and really was kind of nasty as far as what he was telling men to do with women. Even if some of the stuff worked, it's like stuff I would not do myself, and it was things that I could understand why it could appeal to some guys, especially ones that were having trouble getting women to date them or have sex with them or whatever it might be. But that he caught on with that, and he developed a fairly big following, and he took a lot of calls during the show, and some people became big fans of his. Anyway,
like me.
Yeah, so here, that's right. I never introduced Trevor. Here, Trevor, say hello to the audience here.
Hello, audience. This is Trevor Garner, trevorshappyhour.com.
Yes, that's what he runs, is trevorshappyhour.com, and you're going to hear about this during the segment, where that was a small internet podcast and also live show, kind of like this one in a way. That figured into his issues with Tom Leykis, or shall I say Tom Leykis' issues with him. So anyway, Trevor started Trevor's Happy Hour. He had originally started it on a radio station basically with no signal where he used to work in San Bernardino. It's called KCAA. Eventually, he had a falling out with the owner there where Trevor was in the right, and he took his show off there and just moved it to the internet. And the show ran fairly frequently. It would run several times a week, right?
My show?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to talk about something.
Yes.
First of all, as far as Tom Leykis is concerned, I was a big fan.
And as Trevor said, he was a big fan of Tom Leykis, as he wasn't someone who had disdain for him or didn't like him or anything like that.
I want to work with him.
Yeah, he actually kind of a dream about maybe working with him, doing a show together. So, and by this point, by the way, Tom was no longer on the radio in the mid-2010s. Tom had a podcast himself. Tom was long off the radio. He claimed it was his choice. I kind of think he couldn't get a job that he felt was worth his time, because he was getting paid very well in the 90s and 2000s. And then once KLSX switched formats and was no longer talk, he was basically just off the radio. And yeah, he could have gotten a job in like a small market, but he didn't want to do that.
CBS was paying him out of his contract.
Yeah, that's right. And he was also being paid for the end of his contract, because his contract went longer than the station did, and they had to legally pay him. They couldn't break the contract since they're the ones who shut the station off for talk. So anyway, but even when that contract was over, he didn't seem to be really seeking out a radio job. He seemed happy to do the podcast. And yeah, he got a smaller audience, but he still had a decent sized audience, and it was free. And then he also had a pay version of it where you could get access to the archives of the show and I guess some other features. So he was doing various things for money. He had these little meetups where, you'd go have dinner with him and it'd be way marked up, like at a restaurant. But yeah, he was supporting himself that way. And I think he saved a lot of money over time. So he had good money. He even had like a winery he built somewhere. So this was not a radio guy who blew all his money. This was a guy who seemed to be pretty smart with money and seemed to be doing well and seemed to be wealthy, and just did not want to go to a small market and kind of downgrade and work for peanuts, which I guess is understandable, especially because he was an older guy. So this is where he and Trevor ended up clashing, though. Trevor likes to drink. And Trevor, for really most of his life, was drinking very heavily. He loved drinking. He went to the bars all the time. And that's why the show was called Trevor's Happy Hour, because it was a play on the fact that he's always drinking.
And my listeners.
Yeah, and his listeners were drinking a lot too, and the co-host. But a lot of times on the show, because I came on sometimes as a guest, Trevor wasn't drunk, or at least he didn't come off drunk. Were you drunk all the time on the show, or it didn't seem like it to me?
Well, it depends on my blood alcohol level, but, I was sometimes, I didn't drink that much, and it was hit and miss. I don't know.
What blood alcohol level did you need to, appear drunk to people?
0.15.
Oh, that's pretty high. Okay, so, but yeah, it's believable he had a tolerance. So he was drunk on a particular night, and he called up Tom Leykis, and one of our mutual friends had his phone number, which I forgot how, but, Tom Leykis' his personal number. Trevor called him for the very first time on that personal number, and basically was just going to talk. It wasn't a hostile call. It wasn't going to be anything harassing or threatening or anything like that. He had no reason to do that. He liked Tom Leykis. He was a fan of his.
One more fact. I was on with Craig McElvaney. I was on with Zombie Wolf. They were on the call too. So
yeah, and there were other people on there too. Yeah. So the first time you called him, he answered the phone, right?
Yes.
And what did he say when he answered the phone?
Hello.
Well, beyond hello.
Do I know you? I said, my name is Trevor. I said, you know me. So I was a producer for Poor Man, or something to that effect. And he goes, I don't think I know you. I don't know, something like that. I said, well, Tom, I wanted to know if I could work with you. And he goes, I'm writing a book right now. I'm going to have to get back with you. He didn't even say that. He goes, I'll talk to you later, Trevor. And I go, okay, click. That was about it.
Yeah, and that's very important, because the only time they actually had a conversation on the phone, it ended with Tom Tom saying, hey, I'm busy right now writing a book. I'll talk to you later. It wasn't, hey, I don't know you. Please don't call me again. Nothing like that. It was actually ended with, I'll talk to you later. Now, even if Tom didn't plan to talk to him later, he did not say that to Trevor. He just said, hey, I'm busy writing a book right now. I'll talk to you later. So then, Trevor, you called back. When was it you called back after that?
Next day.
The next day he called back. He called back 2 times and left messages on Tom's voicemail. And he was very drunk at that point. And he was at first saying, hey, I'd like to work with you. Let's do a show together. And then at one point said, I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you.
In a radio way, like I'm a stern.
Yeah. So what he meant was, I'm coming for you. Like, I have this show, my own show, Trevor's Happy Hour. I'm coming for your show. I'm going to become more popular than yours. So, you should work with me, because otherwise I'll be coming for you in the ratings. That's what he meant. And I'll tell you, I've known Trevor for 15 years. He's never made any threats to anybody. He's never stalked anybody. He's never done anything. He's not that guy who would threaten people or try to make them physically scared. The I'm coming for you, that really meant, I'm coming for your show. My show's going to beat yours, so let's work together. That's what he was trying to say, and he was drunk, and it didn't come out well. So Tom claimed at that point that he was scared, that he thought these were death threats. And I'll tell you why that's not true. I'll tell you why I don't believe that for a second. Tom had a very hard time with internet criticism. Tom was an older guy. He didn't quite get how the internet worked, yet he was actively on social media, but he didn't quite get how it all worked. He didn't quite get that if you are a well-known radio personality in the LA market, even one that was a former personality there, and you still have a show, that you're going to have people who criticize your show, who criticize you. You're going to have haters, and that's how it goes.
He used to take calls, and there was a guy who called in. He goes, Tom, I'm going to get you, buddy. And he's like, ha, what's your name? And he would actually get threats on that video from people, but he didn't take it serious. He took this serious because he wanted to get ratings for his stuff.
Yeah, that is interesting that he would actually take calls on his show from people who said they're going to come for him, and he would just kind of laugh it off, and then Trevor leaves 2 messages. But I'll get to my theory as to what he was really doing there, why he claimed to be so scared of Trevor. So Tom, as I said, was having a very hard time dealing with criticism on the internet, because you're going to have that. I mean, I get criticism about my show. You guys see that. I get criticism all the time. I get people bashing me. I have people hating on me. It's part of the whole thing that goes with having a presence on the internet. And if you don't like that, then you shouldn't have a presence. You should not do a show that's broadcast on the internet, or you shouldn't do a show at all anywhere if you're going to get mad that people on the internet go there and say bad things about you and your show, because that's just part of it. You can be a private person and avoid that, but he's choosing not to, just like I'm choosing not to. So you have to understand. Now, of course, it has to stop somewhere. You can't have people stalking you. You can't have people threatening you. You can't have people doing things to you. But as far as criticizing you and saying bad things about you and criticizing your show, that's all par for the course. And it's a very simple solution. If you don't like that, just don't do your show.
Right. And somebody tried to attack him when he came out of a restaurant once, and he put that in there about being attacked. He was already threatened before, and somebody physically actually came after him.
Yeah, and that was many years ago. That was when he was on the regular terrestrial radio in Seattle. He did get attacked outside a bar. He got some kind of minor injuries. I think he got like punched in the face and had to have some stitches. He didn't even press charges on the guy, which is interesting, because like, here's someone who actually came up, a stranger just came up who knew him from the show and came up and punched him in the face, just sucker punched him in the face. And I think Tom had to have stitches, and Tom could have definitely pressed charges and sued the guy, and he did nothing to him. This is someone who actually did something that would have deserved any kind of lawsuit or criminal charges, and Tom chose not to. But and this was many years before Trevor's call to him. This is, I think, in the early 2000s. But anyway, you can look it up. It's all on the internet. The reason I believe that Tom got so outraged at Trevor wasn't because he was worried that he was going to be attacked in any way by Trevor. He was very angry and frustrated with this group that was making fun of him on Facebook. And he erroneously believed that Trevor was part of this group, which Trevor was not. Trevor was not in that group. Trevor had nothing to do with these people. He knew one or two from other places, but Trevor never joined that group, never said anything bad about Tom. The few things that Trevor would say about Tom was actually very positive. And he was a fan of his, and not like a deranged, crazy fan. He was just a fan.
I never even listened to his show anymore, so I wasn't even part of I wasn't even a listener of it anymore, really.
Yeah, that's true. He wasn't even listening to the podcast format of Tom's show. So there were, trolls on Facebook that were making fun of Tom and his show, but that's the way it goes. But Trevor wasn't even one of them. But Tom not only believed that Trevor was one of them, he thought Trevor was the ringleader of them. And it was just like decided. He had no evidence of this. He just decided if Trevor's calling him like this, Trevor must be the ringleader of the haters on Facebook, and he's going to show them. So Tom had an attorney who was advertising on his show and paying a lot of money for it. He was the main sponsor of this attorney. So Tom spoke to this attorney, and this attorney suggested, hey, actually, I don't know who came up with the idea. Maybe it was Tom, maybe the attorney, maybe both together. This part I don't know. But they came up with who came up with the idea?
That same night that I made that phone call, the last one, I get a phone call at my cell. It was Brian. It was Ball Sacks. He said, "You're in big trouble, dude." He goes, "You don't ever threaten somebody with the kind of money Tom Leykis has." And he says, "We're going to serve you papers, and you're going to be in big trouble, dude." And then I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You just see it, watch and see," and then he hung up.
Yeah, so this attorney was basically saying that this is too late, that the wheels are now in motion to come after Trevor legally in a very, very aggressive fashion with basically very frivolous lawsuits. So first a frivolous restraining order, and then it was going to be followed by a frivolous civil suit for millions of dollars. And the goal, and I know this goal because I spoke to this attorney, so I tried to kind of play middleman here. I had nothing to do with any of this prior to this. I wasn't on the phone call. I didn't know about the phone call until after it was done, but I was told the whole story, and I thought, okay, I will try to be like a mediator and see if I can reason with this attorney. Because at the time I thought, maybe just legitimately they thought Trevor was a threat. So I spoke to this attorney and I said to him, look, I've spoken to Trevor. He's never going to call Tom again. As far as he knew, Tom was fine with getting more calls. I said, well, I'll talk to you later. But he's not going to do it again. He's not going to make any calls. The things that you were saying were threats were really not threats. And I explained what it was. And I said, look, I promise he'll never hear from Trevor ever again. And if you think it's a lie, then just wait and see what happens. If Trevor keeps bothering him, then take action. But let's just everybody walk away peacefully. Nothing's happened here. No one's done anything to anybody. It just makes sense for everyone to walk away. And it did. But the attorney was very insistent that I was incorrect, that Trevor was the ringleader of this group. I said, I know this group. This group is not, Trevor's not even part of it. He has nothing to do with that group. So no matter what I said to this attorney, he wouldn't believe that Trevor wasn't the ringleader of this group. He wouldn't believe that this wasn't a threatening phone call. He basically just said, look, it's going to happen. There's going to be a restraining order. And then when the restraining order is granted, then we're going to move on to a civil suit. There's nothing you can do to stop it. It's happening. Too bad. And it did. Now I'm going to play you guys a little clip from two shows that Tom Leykis did that pretty much confirms what I'm saying. Just in case you're doubting us here, just in case you think maybe Trevor was stalking the guy and this whole thing wasn't really about scaring away critics on the internet, I'm going to play you first a clip, a very short clip from October of 2016 where he was complaining about the trolls. And then you'll hear 2 months later, after the restraining order was granted against Trevor, you'll hear what he had to say about that and how he puts out the warning to the other people that were criticizing him. Notice he was not saying these people were harassing him, just that these same people were criticizing him on the internet, and that he's coming after them too, that they're getting Trevor first, and then everybody else is going to fall as well.
Like what I do, shouldn't be listening to it. And you'd be amazed if you could see the number of people who purport to hate me or hate what I do or hate my business model. You'd be amazed how many of them get together on the internet and talk about me every day. What I'm saying right now, they'll be talking about tonight. And can you see how pathetic you are when you do that? Can you see how desperate are you? Most of you are adults. None of you act like adults, but most of you are over the age of 21. And there you are out there every single day. Many of you are the people we have blocked from our Facebook page or blocked from our phone number. And there you are out there every day for years and years now.
Now here's a clip from 2 months later where he's telling these same people that they better watch out because look what happened to Trevor.
And so that's what we're doing here. We're going to do everything we can to restrain this guy from harassing me or haranguing me or stalking me in any way. And it's a message to all the other motherfuckers out there, and there's about 6 of you, and we know your names. We know where you all live. Some of you have been served with paperwork by us.
And you know who you are.
You know who you are, and I want you all to know that what I did today is just the beginning. I'm going after you guys one after another with every legal means available in my arsenal. I will use whatever we have. That is it.
So as you see, that's what this was really about. It was not about fear of Trevor. It was not worrying that Trevor's going to keep harassing him. Trevor made 2 phone calls. That was it. This was about stopping what he believed were internet trolls criticizing his show.
And it was always the whole thing came in a ball sack's mouth. That's what I called him. You can tell him why, because it pissed him off. But anyways, what came out of his mouth was, you don't fuck with somebody who has as much money as Tom had. He kept touting that, how much money Tom has, and he's going to get you. You better watch out. That's what he kept saying.
The name ball sacks you keep hearing Trevor mention is a morphing of the attorney's actual name, and called him ball sacks just to irritate him, and it seemed to get the guy mad. But anyway, that's what Trevor's talking about. But regarding this attorney, also, he basically gave me the whole game plan. So he said to me that they're not going to take this anymore, that Tom is sick of these trolls harassing him on Facebook. But again, nobody was harassing him. They were just criticizing his show. They were criticizing him, but that Tom's not going to take this anymore, and an example is going to be made of someone, and that someone is Trevor. So basically, he's saying Tom has deep pockets, and he's going to keep pressing this, and maybe if Trevor's lucky, he'll be let off with settling for something like $20,000 or $30,000. So basically, what the plan was that, and this is what they believed would happen. First, they get a restraining order based on bogus information, which we'll get to shortly. And then after the restraining order is granted, then it can kind of be like a stepping stone to validate the civil suit, which is going to be filed for a scary amount of money for $5 million. And then Trevor would settle for 20 or 30K, and then all the trolls on Facebook would be very, very scared that Trevor from 2 phone calls had to pay 30K, and they would be afraid to ever say anything bad about Tom ever again. So the restraining order was then filed, and it was served. The funny thing is that the service was actually not done properly the first time. Someone just dropped it at the door.
I was dodging it.
Trevor knew it was coming because they told us it was coming, so Trevor was actually dodging it, which I don't blame him because it was a frivolous suit. So he was dodging service. He wouldn't come to the door. The process server claimed that he did serve Trevor.
He dropped it at the door, and my mom picked it up, and she brought it to me and said, "What is this paper?" And I go, "Oh, man." And me and Wally Wharton and Zombie were in the same room talking about things. They had come out to see me. And they started going through it. And they go, "Oh, man, Tom's going to get you, dude." I go, and this is Zombie goes, "Don't worry about it. He's smoking his pot." And Wally Wharton was really scared because she might lose her house over this because it named like other people in the suit. What is it with those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And she said she thought she was a part of it. And why did I get her involved in this? Like, I don't want nothing to do with you, Trevor, anymore. You're in big trouble, mister. So go ahead.
The surprising thing, and Trevor actually he hired an attorney for this to defend him as someone he already knew. So the restraining order case, I was saying at first, I can't see how this would succeed because some of you may not know this. Some of you may have never been part of a restraining order case, either as a plaintiff or a defendant. But what I can tell you is restraining orders are not just granted because you don't want to talk to someone anymore. You don't want someone to call you anymore. Basically, you have to show the judge a persistent pattern of harassment where you're either getting threats or where the person just will absolutely not leave you alone. So if someone makes a few phone calls to you that upset you, you're not going to get a restraining order. Even if it's like semi-threatening, you're not going to get a restraining order granted. Like, let's say someone calls me and says, "Hey, Todd, I think you're an asshole. Next time I see you, I'm going to kick your ass." And I hang up. Then they call back and say, "No, seriously, Todd, if I see you again, I'm going to kick your ass." And then I hang up. And then I get a restraining order against them. That's not going to be granted based on that because they made 2 phone calls, and even though they said they're going to kick my ass, they wouldn't get the restraining order granted just based on 2 calls. Now, if the person called over and over and over and said that, or if the threats escalated to something like, "I'm going to shoot you," then maybe I would. But the thing is, it has to be a pretty serious or ongoing matter to get the restraining order granted. You can't just say, "I don't feel like hearing from this person," give them a restraining order, because it goes on their record. When they go for employment, it can come up. So it's something that's not just handed out lightly. Now, sometimes they are handed out erroneously by judges, and and sometimes judges don't grant them when they should. If you guys remember on this show, we're not going to go into this again, but when Christopher Mitchell got that restraining order against Lee Bradbury, that was very frivolous. That was a ridiculous one. In fact, he was accusing Lee of something that someone else did, and Lee could prove it, and that was a total miscarriage of justice, and Lee had to spend extra money to get that overturned. So as you see, the restraining order cases can really go sideways, and a lot of times they're not adjudicated properly. But anyway, this went to court, and unfortunately, Tom had some assistants of his that had been working with him for a long time lie on the stand and say that Trevor was calling the show hundreds of times and spoofing numbers. And Trevor doesn't know how to do this. Trevor's not a technical guy. Like everything on his show, people had to show him how to do. He's not technical at all. People had to teach him how to do everything technically. For example, I'm over here right now, and Trevor has a little bit of Bitcoin that he wants to sell before his inevitable passing, which is going to be coming soon. And so I was assisting him with it, but he had no idea how to do that. Like that had to be shown step by step. So this is not a guy who's going to spoof numbers. And they had no proof he was spoofing numbers. They just said, here's a bunch of calls we got. And these were spoofed by Trevor. They were really him. They had no recordings. They had no proof. It was just saying Trevor did it. People who've been working for Tom for like 20 years. So obviously these are people who are very biased and are going to have an incentive to say what he wants them to say. So these people just blatantly lied on the stand. And unfortunately, the judge pretty much bought it, and especially when the tapes were played in court of those messages, which were legal to play in court because Trevor left the messages on the voicemail. In California, you can't record anyone on the phone and use that in any court proceedings, but if someone knowingly leaves you a message, that can be used. So that was played in court, and the judge was not convinced by Trevor's counter-argument that he meant I'm just coming for you in a radio sense. And had it just been 2 phone calls, it wouldn't have been granted. But because of that bullshit testimony that Trevor had made hundreds of calls harassing the show, which he definitely didn't. In fact, Trevor even printed the phone bills and was trying to show on the phone bills he didn't do this. They weren't interested in seeing. The judge was not interested in seeing, and granted the restraining order. So that was a bad start. And at that point, Tom and his attorney were very, very pumped up, shall I say. They went on the show. They bragged about it. They were really believing this is the first win of many.
That was the first win of many, except that was the first time I went into the court with Scott DeHaan, my lawyer, and I started calling him ball sacks. And he got really mad about that. And then he got the restraining order, but he asked the judge for his fees, $6,800. And the judge. I
was going to get to that. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I don't want to interrupt you, but I know you have limited energy to talk. But yeah, so they had a separate hearing for the attorney to get his fees, and the attorney was asking for $6,800 or something around the number, $60-something $100, which is excessive for attorneys to get in a restraining order case, a simple restraining order case. Usually they're granted somewhere like in the low 2000s, at least back then. This is 2017. So I was very pessimistic. I remember I was in Lake Tahoe skiing at the time, and I was just really not feeling good. I just thought this was going to be the first in a series of losses that Trevor's going to have that are unfair, because the first one was totally unfair. And it was the same judge was going to be deciding whether the attorney gets his fees of $6,800, which the same judge already decided this restraining order was granted when it shouldn't have been. It definitely shouldn't have been. So I thought, well, he's probably going to win the fees too, and that's going to pump him up even more, and they're going to be even more motivated to keep going with what they're doing. Well, shockingly, he got zero. And the attorney said that...
He cried. He's like, Judge, I have to get my fees. And that's when I started to taunt him. And my lawyer put me in a headlock and said, get out of here, we won. And I said, because I was just laughing at him, and I was like, and he was getting so steamed because I would just call him ball sacks. And that's when, the lawyer got me out of there. But I'm going to say this because I'm still on morphine, but somewhere along the line, the TMZ thing came up. Todd will fill that in. I don't know where it came in.
Yeah. So what happened in this restraining order, the attorney was basically saying, I need my fees, I need to get paid for my work. And we gave Trevor every opportunity to just accept the restraining order, and we were not going to hit him for the fees, because that was the only offer that was made as far as settling. They weren't going to drop it. Remember, I offered on behalf of Trevor. Trevor's never going to call him again. Never, ever, ever have any call, contact, whatever. He'll never contact him again in any way, shape, or form. They were not interested in that because they wanted to make an example of him. So anyway, their offer was, oh, no, the restraining order is going to happen, but if you accept the restraining order, then we won't go after you for the fees, and he wouldn't accept that. He fought it. So the attorney said in court, we gave him every chance to just accept it, and we weren't going to go after the fees, so he wouldn't accept it. So, yeah, of course they deserve the fees. The judge didn't like that. The judge said, wait a minute, you're saying that he didn't deserve his day in court? You're saying that even though this can affect his employment, that he should not have a day in court and that he should have accepted your offer for a restraining order he didn't agree with just to avoid the fees? That doesn't sound right to me. So at that moment, he lost the fees. The judge had decided right then he's getting zero and gave him zero. Now, the funny thing is, she was probably also pissed that he asked for over $6,000, and probably that statement also pissed her off. I think that was the main thing. But she decided she's done with this whole thing. She's going to keep the restraining order in place, but zero fees. So that was the first defeat they had, and they were kind of surprised by it because it was the same judge that gave them the victory the first time. Now they had a defeat. So I was shocked. I remember I was driving back from Lake Tahoe, and the weather wasn't very good, and I was on a windy road, but I got some good news for Trevor that the fees were completely denied. And I said, great, okay, good. Now, by this point, the civil suit had already been filed too. So there was still the $5 million civil suit that Trevor had to deal with. And most obnoxiously, Trevor's mother was named in the suit. So it was his mother, him, some kind of family trust, and then a bunch of John Does that could be added later.
Because I was taking care of my mother in her house, and she's elderly. I was taking care of her, and that's where the calls were made. So my mother's somehow involved in this.
Yeah. So yeah, the backstory to this with Trevor, why he was living with his mom. His mother had dementia and needed someone to take care of her, and Trevor was doing that. So because it was determined that's where Trevor lived, which is true, that's where he was living, that they decided they're going to just go after her and a family trust that's associated with her, and that they were going to do this in order to kind of scare him further, that not only are they going after him, they're going after his mom. They were really hoping he was just going to settle again for $20 or $30K, and then they could wave this in the face of all the people criticizing Tom online, and then everyone would be afraid to ever say anything bad about Tom ever again. That was the fantasy they had of what would occur. However, they made a big mistake in including his mom, aside from the fact that it's really fucked up to do, given that his mom had no idea who Tom Leykis was. His mom had obviously nothing to do with any of this. His mom was elderly with dementia, and she's getting sued for harassing Tom Leykis. I mean, it's crazy. So, I mean, there's no precedent to do this. Just because Trevor's living there taking care of her, even if he was guilty of something, you can't successfully sue her, but they did. Well, that ended up being their undoing indirectly, because this was her house. This wasn't Trevor's house.
I was coming home from the lawsuit one day just to show up. And I was coming home on the Metrolink, and I started to think, I go, if he's going after my mom's house, State Farm Insurance might have a policy to cover her in case of a lawsuit. I called him up, and he said, we've never had anything like this before, but we'll look into it, and I'll run it by my people. And sure enough, we had like some sort of umbrella policy that covered a lawsuit that was going against the house or my mom, and they accepted it. He goes, dude, I got it accepted. The insurance guy said, I got it accepted. We'll pay your legal fees. So that's where it is, because it was my mom's house.
Yeah, so basically at this point, now Trevor was in the driver's seat. First of all, this is a very frivolous case. This civil case, when I read the filing, I was like, okay, this is the flimsiest case ever. There's no way this is ever going to win. There's no way a jury's ever going to find against Trevor here and award money to Tom Leykis for this whole thing. Like, it was just so frivolous. And now that Trevor no longer had to worry about just being buried in legal fees, which otherwise he would have had to worry about that, but now that the insurance company has agreed to cover any legal fees he incurs on this, Trevor went out and hired a law firm in Los Angeles, and basically the money was being directly paid by the insurance company. And now it's true, Tom probably was not paying his attorney because this is probably being done on a contingency basis. But still, they no longer had the strength of, okay, we're going to keep just pressing this until you are buried in legal fees and just agree to settle for something just to make it go away, because Trevor didn't care if it went away. I mean, he cared. He didn't want this to continue, but financially he didn't have to care, and that was a big burden off of his back.
Yes. I dropped Scott DeHaan, got this guy who was like $200, $300 an hour lawyer, And because I was going to make sure that we got a good lawyer. Adley, I don't know, I just found him somewhere. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, so he got these downtown LA lawyers, and they filed a response, and I read the response. It was a pretty good response. I liked the response that they wrote back. And basically, they just took the posture of, no, this is frivolous, this is bullshit, we're going to fight it. And they filed an anti-SLAPP, which you guys are familiar with because that's exactly what I did in the Mike Postle situation, where I was sued for defamation of Mike Postle when he was accused of the cheating, and I ended up winning that. As you guys all know, I won't go into that story again. But with an anti-SLAPP, that's a motion that you file to have a lawsuit dismissed based upon the allegation that the lawsuit is being filed to chill your speech. Basically, it's a frivolous lawsuit to shut you up. And this way you can get it dismissed much earlier and much more cheaply, though it's still never that cheap, but much more cheaply and much earlier than otherwise you'd have to if the whole thing went further. So if the anti-SLAPP succeeds, not only does the whole thing get dismissed and can't be refiled, but also the other side owes you your attorney's fees. So while Trevor wasn't paying the attorney's fees because it was coming out of his insurance, it would be some satisfaction that Tom would now have to pay the attorney's fees for what the insurance had incurred. So anyway, I'm sure that they were very confused on Tom Leykis' end, how Trevor had all this money to just keep fighting back at this. And this thing dragged on for a while.
You know, when you called me on the phone and said, dude, you're in TMZ, and you never got into that part.
Yeah, that's right. So that's true. Trevor's on TMZ. You can go Google it. His name's Trevor Garner, and you can Google it. And by the way, when you read it, it's not true. Like, what's being said is not true. The only thing's true is he made those phone calls, but they had some connection to TMZ because of Tom Leykis' notoriety in the 90s and 2000s. So they reached someone there at TMZ and told them the story that they have an obsessed fan, that Tom has an obsessed fan, and had to get a restraining order against him. And because the restraining order had been granted, they were actually able to legally print Trevor's name. Didn't have a picture of him, but legally print Trevor's name as the obsessed fan on TMZ who was harassing and stalking Tom Leykis, which was so not true. There were 2 phone calls that I already described to you. It was such a lie. Well, Trevor actually took this in good humor and actually incorporated this into his show, and he made these T-shirts that, and in fact, there's a picture of me wearing one of them, where it says Trevor's Happy Hour on the front, and then it says official obsessed fan.
And a picture of Tom Leykis.
And a character of Tom.
Molly Wharton Drew. Yeah. We were in court.
That's right.
Court. That was his profile in court, and she was sketching him because she's a drawer.
That's right. This was Wally Wharton. She's an artist, and she drew kind of a funny picture of Tom Leykis in court, and they used that picture that she drew for the T-shirt, saying "official obsessed fan of Trevor's Happy Hour." So he kind of leaned into it. The other funny thing was when Tom tried to direct everyone on his Facebook page to go to Trevor's page and harass him, Trevor changed his banner on Facebook to be a promo for his show. Come listen to Trevor's Happy Hour, and had the URL of it. So he was kind of trolling him back with all this crap he was doing here.
Get TMZ to let me file a response. If you read at the top, there's a response that I wrote, but I didn't write it. Scott DeHaan wrote it for me, and it says something about I liked his fatness, PHATNESS, and bugs. He had bugs in his wine, and that was all part of the thing too.
Yeah, and so the bugs in the wine, yeah, that's kind of a funny thing that happened through this. So I don't know, maybe Trevor can explain this now. One time when Tom Leykis' name was brought up, Trevor said, "Oh, Tom has bugs in his wine." Now it is true. It is true that Tom makes wine made wine at his vineyard that he owns in Central California. But I don't know why Trevor, I think he was just drunk. He just said offhandedly, Tom has bugs in his wine. And
I've got all the recordings. You gave them to me. They're all recorded on Irving's computer, my computer. It was a joke because I heard on some show that all wine bottles have bugs in them somewhere.
Yeah, and it's actually true that there are tiny microscopic bugs. You can look this up that are in wine, and it's fine. It's not unhealthy for you. So he was kind of joking that there's cinnamon at the bottom of the wine bottles, and there's bugs in his wine because there's bugs in everybody's wine. But Tom took this so offensively, so that was part of the lawsuit too. But then there are all these different bugs in the wine jokes made on Trevor's show. So Trevor was kind of trying to troll him back and keeping good nature throughout this whole thing as much as he could. As you can imagine, it was very stressful, even though though he wasn't paying the bills here for the attorneys, it was very stressful to have a $5 million lawsuit over his head that's being brought by a celebrity, because, Tom is a local celebrity in L.A. Everybody remembers him, around this age group, who was in L.A. in the 90s and 2000s. And to have that hanging over his head when he hadn't done anything wrong, and also this aimed at his mom, too, and his mom's house. And it was very stressful, as you might imagine. Picture if you were in his shoes, how you'd feel. So anyway, this kept dragging on, and then came the second turning point. So in April of, I think, 2017, I think this was when it was, and I remember listening to this show, and I was pretty shocked by it. On Tom's show, he and the attorney were going on and about this whole thing, and then Tom went on this whole rant about how Trevor is crying about what's happening to him, and that this should be a message. This should be a message to all the trolls out there on the internet that he's going to come for you. If you may think that you can say what you want about him, but he's going to come for you legally, just like he's done against Trevor, and he's going to come get you. And he said, just stay in your lane, I'll stay in mine, but if you talk shit about me, and he could say this, he could say talk shit because he wasn't on the regular radio anymore. It was on a podcast that he did. He said, you talk shit about me, I'm going to come for you. So I'm paraphrasing. This isn't exact words, but I was like, wow, this is pretty much...
And I'm coming after your mother's house.
No, that's right. He said, I'll come after you. I'll come after your house. I'll come after your mother's house if I have to. So I go, wow, this is like textbook anti-slap. Because remember, the anti-slap laws in California dismiss lawsuits that are filed strictly to chill speech. So here you had Tom on his own show, which of course could be used in court, stating just directly that he filed this lawsuit against Trevor to chill the speech of the people criticizing him online. I couldn't believe he was admitting that. So he didn't say those words, but it was very clear where he's saying, let this be a lesson to all of you. If you talk shit about me, I'll go after you. I'll take your house. I'll take your mother's house. And obviously that has to do with Trevor. He was even making fun of Trevor right before that about crying about this whole thing. So I go, wow, it's one thing to sue him to kind of give a subtle message to everybody else to never criticize him again, but to actually say, hey, look what's happening to this guy. You better stop criticizing me or I'm going to take your mom's house too. Wow.
Crying to mommy.
Yeah, that's right. He said you're going to be crying to mommy. So I'm like, wow, if that's played in court, that's going to look awful. It's going to look like a bully, a rich famous bully who is suing an innocent guy who doesn't have much to try to scare others on the internet for not criticizing his radio show. I was like, wow, that looks really awful if that ever gets to court. I called Trevor and I said, you know what, he really screwed himself here. There's no way he's going to win this now. Yeah, and we recorded it, and of course it could be used in court because this was on his public-facing podcast that was open to the public to listen for free. And of course, he knowingly recorded himself. So this isn't like recording him talking to his buddy in a restaurant. This was recording him on his own podcast, which could be played in court. This could directly be played in court. This would sound horrible to a jury. There's no way they would ever award him anything when that was heard. And in fact, the anti-slap would be easily granted based on that. So I had a feeling that this was a huge turning point as well. And what happened next, I didn't expect. Now, Trevor gave it away a little bit, but I'll tell you what happened next. What happened next is all of a sudden, the lawyer was no longer welcome on the show. He used to come on like every Tuesday and do an hour-long segment, like an advertorial, and he was no longer welcome on the show. They actually read a statement that he was no longer welcome in the studio, and he was dropped as Tom's attorney. And he was out of it, and Tom went and hired a new attorney that wasn't working for on contingency. He was working for like $900 an hour. That's some expensive attorney. So now Trevor was really in the driver's seat because now Tom no longer had his attorney working presumably on contingency. I never got proof of that, but it kind of seemed like it. And he had to just go hire a regular attorney. And the reason I'm just about sure this wasn't on contingency was a lot of reasons, but one of them is this was a horrible case. This was a very frivolous case. No attorney was going to take this on contingency that didn't already have a relationship with Tom.
And he's an expensive lawyer. Like from what I found, he's like $800 an hour.
Yeah.
He's like one of those really high-end attorneys.
Yeah, so now Trevor's in the driver's seat. He's got his insurance company paying his lawyers, and then Tom has to pay his lawyer out of his own pocket now.
And that much, he must be scared.
Yeah, and so by this point, the anti-slap had already been filed, and Tom was getting concerned. Now Tom was on the defensive because Tom realized that a lot of money had been run up defending this already, and that if the anti-slap was granted, that Tom was going to end up having to pay a good sum of money to Trevor's lawyers, and maybe this could open up Trevor filing another lawsuit against him.
My whole point of view was the more he has to pay to his attorney, the better. I go, let him keep going. And I'll just say it. I kept coming back month after month when they said the next hearing's like on this date. I said, I'll see. I told his attorney, I go, I'll see you next month. I said, I'll see you next month. And it came up somewhere in there. He goes, Trevor, would you please stop making me take this man's money? That's what his lawyer said to me. He said, please settle for something. I said, no, I'll see you next month. Let him pay you.
Yeah, so he pretty much got himself trapped there, and the problem is he couldn't just drop it at that point because, one, he would lose the anti-slap and owe all that money for the attorney's fees that a lot had been racked up.
And that's when I go, oh my gosh, I'm into something that's going to physically, mentally, and just hurt me. It was but I can't stop. I got to keep going against this guy because I'll say it, I hated his guts, and it was I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, and it was rightfully so why he hated his guts, because he just went after Trevor for the only reason basically is to scare others on the internet he didn't even know from stopping criticizing his radio show, which is crazy. So anyway, Trevor just kept on refusing to drop the whole thing on his end. He wouldn't drop the anti-slap. He and his mom would not agree not to sue Tom back for malicious prosecution here. And so he was worried about that too, especially the mother part, because there was no justification to sue the mother here, and that could be a successful case against him. So this dragged on for 2.5 years, as Trevor said. Now, what about Tom's show? Well, remember, the main sponsor was this original attorney who no longer was welcome there. And so we don't know what happened for sure, but my theory has always been that they had a big argument because this attorney was working probably on contingency, and he probably went to Tom and said, what the fuck did you just do? You just ruined our case here by saying what you did on the show. Now, no one's going to get paid. I did all this work for nothing. What the fuck? And then Tom probably said something like, look, this was your idea in the first place. They probably had a big fight. That's my guess. I don't know.
And that's when Tom pulled all of his segments, for how many years was he on with Tom?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Pulled it all off of his website.
Yeah, there's a lot of work, too. He actually paid some of his assistants to go through 250 segments that this guy had been on and scrub those segments. They had to manually edit. There's no AI to do this for you back in those days. They had to manually edit 250 programs and scrub this guy's segments out. It was unbelievable how much hate that he and that attorney then had for each other over this. So obviously, that cash cow that was sponsoring Tom's show was out the window. And you may say, well, how much could this cost to produce? I do a podcast and it doesn't cost me much money. But Tom insisted on doing this with a real studio he was renting and with expensive equipment. He just couldn't get out of the old school radio mindset. So, and he had these assistants working with him as screeners. So it was costing him a good deal of money for this show, but he was able to cover it with what this attorney was paying to sponsor, a few other small sponsors, and then the subscriptions.
At that point, Todd, do you think that Likas or Ballsex came up with the idea to sue me? Because he must have hated Ballsex so much to scrub those segments. It was why would he do that unless Ballsex came up with it? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's a good question of whose idea it was. I've always wondered which one of them came up with it. It may have been the attorney's idea to try this lawsuit. My kind of guess was that it was the attorney who came up with it, and that's, I think, maybe what the argument was. So they probably had a big fight about it where Tom said, hey, why did you get me into this mess? And then the attorney said, no, this wouldn't be a mess if you hadn't gone on the radio and screwed up. So that's probably where the fight was. But I have no confirmation of this. This is just my guess, just from observing the situation. So anyway, Trevor was definitely in the driver's seat at this point, and Tom was regretting this big time. His show no longer had its main sponsor. It was losing big money because it didn't have that main sponsor. And soon enough, the show went from something that was, similar to a professionally made radio show with screeners and a studio and everything like that, to kind of more a simple podcast that was behind a paywall that you had to subscribe to hear. So obviously his audience went way, 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 way down. It certainly wasn't as big as the audience he had on radio, but he had a decent audience for his podcast. But now the audience was way, way down because he had to pay to listen to it. And I think the studio was gone. And so the whole thing was pared way down. And this was all because he unsuccessfully went after Trevor like this and lost his main sponsor, which was the attorney. And now he was also facing, who knows how much he was going to be responsible for from possibly losing the anti-slap and possibly suits that were going to come forward. Well, that summer in 2017, indeed, the anti-slap was partially granted. I actually hoped it was going to be completely granted, but it was granted on certain counts, but not others. It helped Tom a little bit, but the problem was, here's what Tom had going for him. It was very little. he had some counts that were not dismissed by the anti-SLAPP that he could go forward with, but they were all very weak. So the ones that weren't immediately dismissed, but they had no chance to win in front of a jury, and everybody knew it. Every competent attorney that would have seen this would have said that has no chance. So he knew he had a dog of a case. And Trevor, on the other hand, already had won the rights to some money from the anti-SLAPP that was granted, the portions that were granted, and also might be able to bring, or at least his mother could bring, a malicious prosecution suit in the future. So he was very much in the driver's seat, Trevor, and of course he's not paying his own attorneys about this whole thing. So for 2.5 years, this dragged on, and Tom just kept saying, let's end it, let's end it, let's end it. Trevor's like, no, F you did this to me, you're good.
It took a lot out of me. I mean, I was like so bored down, I had to quit. When I tried to put my mom in a home, it was like over. I couldn't take it mentally, physically, or anything. I was drinking through it, so.
It had kind of an anticlimactic ending, and they did sign a confidentiality agreement about what it's going to be, so you're not going to hear what the actual settlement was at the end, but Trevor, I don't believe he gave a penny to Tom. I'd be very shocked if he did.
No.
So the bottom line is that Trevor did not have to pay these attorneys in L.A. anything when the whole thing was said and done. Tom had to pay a fortune to that attorney that he hired in L.A. after the first one left. Trevor quit it because his mom had dementia. She was getting worse. This was stressful for her, stressful for him. She had to eventually be put in a home because of her condition deteriorating. And Trevor was just he had just so much going on in his life. He just got tired of dealing with it after 2.5 years, so he finally put an end to it, and it's understandable. And he was drinking a lot more because of it. And so
the court clerk would say that. He goes like, "When is this thing gonna ever end?" I mean, he was like, "Yeah." The court clerk says that at the end, and I started to think about it. And then on the last day that they offered again, the judge looked at me and goes, "I don't know if you call Trevor or Mr. Garner. I mean, Mr. Garner, are you sure you want to end this?" That's what she said, like almost like, "I'm on your side, dude." So that's like, I go, "Oh man, I got to keep going." And I thought about it. I was on my own then. Scott had quit. I was on my own going in there. He quit the whole thing, and I just took a deep breath. And I said, "Yeah, let's just end it."
Yeah, and there's one other thing I forgot to say. He didn't have attorneys at this point because once Trevor's mom was dropped out of the suit, which occurred, somewhat in the middle of this whole thing, the insurance company would not pay anymore because she was the only reason they were paying because it was her house. So then he was left on his own. So Trevor got that original attorney who helped him during the restraining order to give him some assistance there. But eventually Trevor just decided to go it alone and just, basically let the bills run up on Tom's end. Of course, Trevor's not an attorney himself, and he just from all the stress, he decided to put an end to the whole thing.
All by myself at that point. And I just had to say, I can't do it. I just can't do it no more.
So if you want to listen to Tom Leykis' show today, can you go pay to do it? Answer, no. Because eventually Tom realized, he's getting older, and he had a tiny audience because it was only people who paid to listen. And he realized he's broadcasting to very few people, and he doesn't need what little money it was generating, and it may have been losing money. So he just realized, why am I talking to almost nobody? I'm just going to quit. So he quit. That's the end of it. And I can't say this for sure because, I can't tell you what would have happened. I'm not psychic, but my guess is if he never went after Trevor in the first place, he would still be doing his show that he'd been doing, the podcast he had been doing for a long time. He'd still be doing it for free every day with the premium content being the archives there, and he'd still have that attorney paying a lot of money every month to advertise on there. It would be the status quo all the way. 9 years later, we'd be sitting with the same thing, or at least for several years. Maybe at this point he would have quit because he's gotten pretty old, but maybe not. The point is here, this would have gone a lot longer and maybe still be going today if he had not done this to Trevor. And I thought that was something that was very satisfying for Trevor to see, is that a bully, a rich, famous bully who couldn't take being criticized on the internet by people Trevor didn't even know, tried to make an example of him, tried to file a frivolous lawsuit, tried to get $30K or so out of him, but filed for $5 million, but at minimum was trying for something like $30K, filed a bogus restraining order, filed a frivolous lawsuit, and then got the restraining order, but the lawsuit was going nowhere, and it backfired on him. And not only did it cost him a ton of money, but he ended up losing his show out of it for the reasons I stated. So there was no more show, and it's all because of this thing he tried to do to Trevor. So really, this is like a David versus Goliath thing, and David won. That was very satisfying for me to see happen. This was just a complete abuse of the legal system. And I remember seeing it and going, this really sucks that, people who have money or connections can just file these frivolous suits and also frivolous restraining orders and really make things hell for just ordinary people who haven't done anything wrong. And even though the anti-SLAPP is there to protect against it, it still costs a lot of money to even get there, and you have to format all of that right. You can't just walk in as an individual yourself and try to defend it. You usually won't win. So it's not as simple as it looks. So I was glad that was the result. I wanted to tell you guys this story because it does involve an LA area celebrity who's, by the way, he's well known enough around the country that either Family Guy or American Dad did a little gag about Tom Leykis on there. So obviously he's known well enough for that. And yeah, it's pretty sad. And these days what Tom Leykis is doing is just tweeting anti-Trump stuff.
Everybody started crank calling him on other shows. And that was you. He was on a different show. Who are these people? Can't you get rid of them? No.
Like after this was all going on, some of Trevor's fans were calling up and pranking those other shows to taunt Tom about this whole thing. And, hey, do you try to sue old ladies with dementia? Because Tom didn't want to talk about that. He was posturing this whole thing about the supposed deranged fan stalking him, and he got a restraining order against him. He did not ever want it known that he sued an old lady with dementia who didn't know he existed for stalking him. That's what he did. He really sued an old lady with dementia who didn't know he existed. And he knew that. And I told them that. They can't even claim that they weren't told this because I told them that Trevor's mom does not know who Tom is. And I was told, no, we think she does. We think she was part of this. I'm like, I can't believe this. And I didn't believe them. I knew they were just saying this because they wanted to justify what they were doing to try to make an example of someone they thought was part of that group criticizing Tom. So that was all really bad. I felt very bad for Trevor as it was going on. But I will say I feel worse for Trevor now because unfortunately Trevor, he was diagnosed, how long was it, like 3 weeks ago or so?
6-7 weeks ago.
6 weeks ago, he found out that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And, that you don't come back from that, unfortunately. And when this is what killed Steve Jobs at 55. And so unfortunately, Trevor and Patrick Swayze. And so it doesn't matter how rich or famous you are or what medical care you have access to at this point in time when you have pancreatic cancer, which is almost always late stage because it hides very well into the early stages, so you don't catch it early. And once you find out you've got pancreatic cancer, you basically just have to say goodbye. So, Trevor's making the best of it here. He's been talking to all his friends, including me, and people have been coming down and visiting him. And he's making the most of his time left here. He's physically in a lot of pain, as you might imagine, with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And I appreciate him doing this segment with me, which I'm pre-recording here from the hospital and played on one of the shows upcoming.
I'll throw this in. At my stage where I've got pancreatic cancer, I'm going to say something Tom Leykis. Tom Leykis, I forgive you. Tom Leykis, I did like you a lot. And Tom Leykis, I think you're a coward. But anyways, going out, Tom, I wish the best for you and for Dino and Gary.
That's pretty forgiving of you. I don't think I would. If I were you, I would not. I wouldn't have forgave anybody. I know some people are more forgiving than I am. But, yeah, yeah. Trevor just said he wouldn't carry as an atheist anyway. But so that was very unfortunate abuse of the legal system, and then very unfortunate that Trevor turns out he has pancreatic cancer now. And
I don't want to go out holding any grudges.
Yeah, he doesn't want to go out holding grudges. He just said, and I can understand that. You might wonder, given that I said Trevor has been a heavy drinker for just about all his life, is that the reason he has pancreatic cancer? Because he's only 59 years old, so obviously he's going to be passing away much sooner than he expected. Is it the fault of the drinking? And I actually looked this up because I had wondered if that were the case, and it seems like this is inconclusive. There have been some beliefs it could possibly do it, but at the same time, there is not research indicating that this has to do with pancreatic cancer and that it may not be connected.
I believe it's the drinking that caused the diabetes, which caused my vascular problems, which caused my nerve damage. I got nerves age of like a 70, 80-year-old man. And all of it just all in one bailiwick, put it all together, it's like, that's what caused it. It caused my lifestyle, caused it. And But you can't get proof it caused it. But look, I did it to myself, and I'm ready to, I accept it. Except Tom Likas, I still don't want to have the grudges against you, you know.
Yeah, I'll say this for Trevor. Most of you guys don't know him, but he was someone who lived life on his own terms. And a lot of times they say that about someone as they're after they pass away, but he really did. This is someone who hasn't had a 9-to-5 job in decades, and he basically had fun and lived his life the way he wanted, including the drinking. And he always hustled to make money. He sold radio ads, he sold baseball cards. He was very good at sales, Trevor. Really good at all kinds of sales. And he just made money for himself and kept himself supported. He was never a rich guy, but he always was able to support himself and the lifestyle he wanted to have.
Never wanted for anything.
Yeah, he did. He was someone who always could afford to do everything he wanted to do and just every day wanted to enjoy life. He said, I don't ever want to just live life in a way where I'm not enjoying every day. So I told him, when I heard about this pancreatic cancer, and I'm very sad to hear about the diagnosis, I said, at least you're not one of the people who was a workaholic and was working at a job you hated, looking forward to being 65, and then you get this and you realize you're not going to make it. At least you, for the last few decades, you lived your life every day the way you wanted to. And I said, you can feel good about that was the decision you made. And doing the show he did, and I'll tell you, the show kind of established like a community. Like there's a lot of people now that got to know each other or know each other better through Trevor's Happy Hour, that are friends, that they care about Trevor. Some of them have come down to see him, including some that hadn't actually met him in person before.
One of them died, or that guy, the BJ or something.
Yeah, and that's the other thing.
A lot of my callers have died.
Unfortunately, I'll say this though, health-wise, the people associated with the show were not particularly lucky. A guy named BJ died of COVID in 2020. And Dave Lehrman, you remember him, he's appeared on Poker Fraud Alert Radio before. He was part of that whole community, and he was my friend as well, and he passed away at 55. And that was kind of mysterious. We don't exactly know what killed Dave, but we've been discussing it since what happened to Trevor, and we kind of think that Dave Lehrman did, he may have had cancer and just hid it from everybody.
Victorville Dave.
Yeah, and then there was a guy named Victorville Dave who was kind of peripherally part of the group, and he was very obese, so it wasn't that surprising that he was like 700 pounds, but he passed away at like age 46, it's like I think in 2018. So yeah, a number of people have passed away, and unfortunately Trevor, his time is going to come soon as well. So that's been unfortunate. By the way, if you are familiar with autistic Canadian weather guy Frankie McDonald, who has kind of a cult following on the internet, he is actually part of this community, and we even had Frankie make a little custom Poker Fraud Alert shout out that Trevor asked him to do. Frankie doesn't really know me very well, but Trevor asked him to do it, and we actually made it for Sonatine, who is a forum member that liked to post Frankie videos and didn't even realize that we knew him. So he was shocked when there was a custom video made for Sonatine by Frankie. He couldn't believe it because I had a connection to Frankie through Trevor's show, and Frankie's been very active in this whole group.
I've had him at McDonald's.
That's right. The original co-host of Trevor's Happy Hour was a guy he met at McDonald's. This guy named Lyle that he just met at McDonald's and said at the drive-thru and said, "You know what? I think you'd be good on the radio." And the funny thing is, Lyle was kind of like a good sidekick co-host type.
It was like, yeah, Lyle, I just picked these people out of nowhere. They were just like people that I saw, like Christian Berman. She has Asperger's, and I looked at her. She was asking for people to buy her drawings, and I liked them, and I said, yeah, can you do I paid her $250 to do caricatures of the people of my show, and they're up on my website. So it's just anybody that, do I have just weird people on my show? No, I guess I gravitate towards people that are like this, and they all seem to get along together, most of them.
One thing that's interesting is that, as Trevor mentioned, a lot of people who are associated with the show, there's a lot of kind of oddball, unusual people. Frankie McDonald's a good example of it, but they all kind of get along. They all kind of understand each other. And Trevor's like a very inclusive guy. Like he just, if he kind of just notices you, or you kind of wanted to be part of everything, he doesn't say, "Go away, I don't want you to be part of this," or you're not good enough for me. Like no matter how strange they are, or unusual they are, or whatever strange mannerisms they might have, like he welcomes them into the fold, and it makes them feel good that they're part of the whole thing. And it kind of was like a little family he created there all these years. And that's why, a lot of people are very sad. I know most of the listeners here don't know Trevor, But as soon as I heard he was sick like this, I thought, I for sure have to do like a interview with him about the Lycus thing, and also just kind of to introduce him to the audience. And this is someone that I knew separate from the poker and gambling worlds. That's why you guys don't know him. But I think about this a lot. I think about what's happened to Trevor a lot. It makes me very sad that, one day soon he's not going to be here anymore, and he's only 59. And, you never know when your time's coming. You never know when it's going to be done for you. And sometimes you can even do everything right. I know Trevor didn't exactly live a healthy lifestyle, but this didn't necessarily have to happen. And a lot of times people really do live healthy lifestyles, and something like this gets them anyway. In fact, pancreatic cancer, some people believe, and when I say some people, I mean like researchers and doctors, some believe it is almost completely random, and it's just going to come for you if you're unlucky. So that may have really been what happened to him. There may have been a cause plus being unlucky. We'll never know. It can't exactly tell us. But yeah, it's a sad moment here. And, I came in here and I saw how Trevor looks, and he looks, he looks like he's sick. He's low energy. He's lying in the hospital bed, and just close the door of this room, and we're doing this segment here. And, when this is over, I'm going to go back, probably make a stop over at a poker room because it happens to be on the way back to where I live. And but yeah, it's going to be sad. And when Trevor's actually really gone, whatever day that happens, that it's going to affect me a lot. I'm going to feel very saddened by this, and I'm glad I got to know Trevor and got to be friends with him. And this is sad. It's going to be strange when he's gone, when he's just not there anymore. And in fact, there's a picture of me, Trevor, and Dave Lehrman that's been posted on the Poker Fraud Alert forum. And that's strange for me to think about because, this is taken I think 2013 or so. And pretty soon I'm going to be the only one left in that photo. And no one in that photo was old. So it's just really sad to think about. So anyway, Trevor, thank you for coming on here in the condition you are. And, I hope you have as much time left as possible, and that you can at least enjoy whatever time you have left here and make the most of it. And I'm glad you are at least, seeing people and talking to people and not just lying away from everybody and living your final days alone.
I can lie here alone, or I can lie here with somebody doing this. Might as well, time moves on, might as well do something with it positive. And that's the way I feel,
Yeah, and that's a good attitude to have, and that's what I would be doing if I were given a diagnosis like this. Maybe one day I will. I would want to use that time valuably, and I always wondered, what would I rather have killing me? Would I rather a heart attack that just abruptly kills me, or cancer where it's slow and painful, but at least I know it's coming and can say goodbye to everybody? And I still think I'd rather have the cancer because at least you have time to just connect with everybody and reflect and let them know what they meant to you. And I know it sucks knowing what's coming, and the pain and illness really sucks. I just know from Trevor is saying, he said to me that he wouldn't even want to live a really long time feeling like this, and I can understand that. So anyway, I hope with whatever meds they can give you that you can live out the remainder of your life at least semi-pleasantly. And, all of us are going to be thinking about you the whole way and communicating with you the whole way. And sure, more people will come down to see you. In fact, I'd come down more often if I wasn't. I don't live anywhere near here, so I had to drive some distance to get over here. But I knew I had to do this. So anyway, Trevor, thanks for appearing on here. And I'm sure the listeners will get a kick out of this whole story.
I'll say one other thing. I grew up in a Christian, Lutheran school. And everybody's been touting Jesus to me, get right with God and all that. I do believe there's a higher power up there. I think it's God, but you can believe what you want. But someone's pulling the strings. I believe it. I don't know if you do, but that's how I feel. And making me do this makes me happy because it's I'm just kind of giving back my life to people. So maybe they can use it for good. I would not do what I did or do what I did. And don't get in a suit with Tom Likas. Is that a good idea?
and by the way, Trevor he's been very nice and generous with various people who are less fortunate. Again, he's not a rich guy and never has been, but he's been generous with people as well, with time, with money, with effort, with friendship. And yeah, so he's a good guy with a good heart, and it's going to be sad when the world's without him, and sucks the way things go sometimes. So anyway, I'm going to end the segment here, and it's been an hour 15.
Go to YouTube, Trevor's Happy Hour. Go to Trevor Garner on YouTube. Go to Spotify, Trevor's Happy Hour. You can listen to all my shows. And go to the website, trevorshappyhour.com. And you can see pictures of what we did. It'd be like going through bars and like hanging out with women. A lot of it's a facade, but I had a lot of fun.
You'll even see a picture of me on there with giving a thumbs up from the Rio during the World Series of Poker, just in my room, with a Trevor's Happy Hour shirt on. And for some reason, my beard looks red, which I never understood. My beard is not red. It's never been red, but it actually looks red in that picture. I have a red beard. But there's a picture of me there you'll see, and Poker Fraudler is listed as the friend of the show. So, yeah, and supposedly the show is going to continue after Trevor is gone with some the guys who Trevor gave the computer to, and I said I'll be happy to assist with getting that online for them if they need that help. So anyway, thank you, Trevor, for coming on, and I hope the listeners found this interesting. And if you didn't, well, too bad, you've listened anyway. So that was the end of the interview I had with Trevor, and then I said my goodbyes to him. We took a picture before we left, and I really thought he had about 2 more months to live, so I told him, hey, I'll come back down sometime fairly soon when I'm in the area next. And I thought I'd see him, again. I didn't think that was the very last time I was seeing him. I knew he had little time left, but I didn't know how little. And then I got the news 3 days later that he was gone, just about exactly 72 hours from when I walked out that door. I am glad I got down there to see him in the hospital and do this interview with him and talk to him about just a lot of other stuff, and also make him feel better about his predicament, about as well as I could make him feel given the circumstances. So yeah, it's kind of sad, when you get to that age where you have your friends that are near your age passing away, the ones that are not lucky or have other circumstances that take them away early. I don't want to end this on a depressing note, but it's kind of hard not to under the circumstances. Anyway, as I said before this interview was played here on this episode, we have a lot more here in the tank that I recorded, a number of other topics, about 10 more. Nothing really long, but we have 10 more and probably about 3.5 hours of content left that I will post in part 2 within the next few days. But wanted to get this up here, and then I'll post the other stuff. You know how it goes when there's a fairly long show. And I'll try to get the next show up, recorded and up. That is not part 2, but the actual next broadcast we do sometime by mid-month. So thanks for sticking with Poker Fraudler Radio, even though we're not quite as frequent as we used to be. You know how it ends here. Good night. And shalom. Rest in peace, Trevor.